Chapter 11:24. Ding! The ethereal sound of the bell rang out, and all fell silent. It was as if all sound had been sucked away by the sound of the bell. It was deathly silence and speechlessness. Clang! The bell shook again, and the ethereal sound was immediately shattered. It became extremely chaotic and noisy. The demonfolk army became restless. The bell did not seem to ring out from their ears, but from their hearts. The unquenchable and unforgettable regret, anger, disappointment, loneliness, and fear. All of them started to whisper, and along with the sound of the bell, the whispers grew louder and louder, roaring and arguing without end. This was the confusion and noise of life. Between life and death was great terror and great confusion. This was the chaotic soul. As Little Ann urged on the chaotic soul bell, she chanted softly. It was both an indistinct dragon's roar and a solemn order, combining with the sound of the bell and becoming even more chaotic. Her silence just now was not only to control the skull prayer beads to deal with the battle in the distance, but also to balance the Buddha and the demon, pushing the power of the chaotic soul bell to the limit. Most of the demon domain army were regular demon folk, so they immediately fell into chaos and began killing one another. Even the demon generals became agitated. They were tempted to go on a killing spree. The demon commanders still maintained their rationality, but they could not maintain their footing at all. The demon kings were unaffected, but they did not have the authority to command the army at all. This belonged to the Demohun army. With the army in chaos, they immediately lost their unity. The 3,000-meter-tall Demohun immediately blurred. The Demohun's expression changed, and his killing intent immediately rose. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. This was basically a weapon of mass destruction. Sure enough, Little Ann was the most reliable. The 3,000-meter-tall sword that had cut through the Scarlet Dragon King swept through the sky, surging with demon chi as it swung towards Little Ann in the sky. Little Ann ignored it. She did not move at all, focusing on powering the chaotic soul bell. Her white lunar monk robes drifted in the wind. A blood-red moon rose into the sky. Li Qingshan cut through the 3,000-meter-tall sword in a single stroke and stood in front of Little Ann. He pointed his blade at the Demohun. "Your enemy is me." The Demohun suddenly bellowed out. The 1,000-foot-tall war demon behind him also opened his arms wide. He let out a terrifying battle roar, which immediately drowned out the sound of the bell. The demon folk all roused from their chaos. Clear River Prefecture. The devastated land was bathed in the sunlight, and it was dyed with a layer of warmth. The golden cicada spirit king looked up at the sky in a daze. The cicada wings on her back rippled with a beautiful flowing light. Li Qingshan was also in a daze. Did this mean that he had failed the tribulation? After all, if he succeeded in transcending the tribulation, this world would not be able to accommodate him. Since he did not succeed in ascending, it meant that he had failed. However, such a situation was far too rare. Overcoming a tribulation was often a battle of life and death. If one succeeded, they would be able to ascend a level higher. But if they failed, their souls would be dispersed, and they would not even have a corpse left. Generally, only one heavenly tribulation would have a chance of surviving despite failing to transcend the tribulation. Moreover, the possibility was very small. The serious injuries they suffered would often sever their path of cultivation. He had never heard of anyone surviving the ascension heavenly tribulation. However, the golden cicada spirit king's cultivation had clearly increased, only half a step away from ascending. Not only was he unharmed, but he even benefited from it, which was unbelievable. However, Gu Yinying could vaguely guess the reason behind this. The heavenly tribulation was already close to its end, and the soaring Locust King had thrown countless clones that possessed his aura into the lightning earlier. In the end, his original body died to the lightning too, coupled with his personal strength that was extremely close to undergoing the tribulation. The heavenly tribulation concluded that the person undergoing the tribulation was already dead. There were far too many insignificant fortuitous encounters and rare coincidences involved, which was why this was the case. She could not help but sigh. The soaring Locust King had wholeheartedly tried to stop the golden cicada spirit king from undergoing the tribulation, and he had put in tremendous effort, only to bear the horrific price of failing the tribulation for the Golden Cicada Spirit King in the end. Jin Fugui and Yu Wuyang both let out a sigh of relief. No matter what, they had finally dealt with a great problem for the Green Province. This was their responsibility as the Golden Hawk Commander and the Great General King. Suddenly, he remembered what the Soaring Locust King had shown him in the beginning, and asked Li Qingshan in a hurry. How's the Chan Monastery of Devanaga? The Demon Suppression Hall has been destroyed, and the Demon Cavern has already opened. The Demon Domain has launched a large-scale attack. An army of 1 million has already killed their way over. I'm going back right now to provide support. If you're interested, you can go take a look with me. Li Qingshan glanced at the Golden Cicada Spirit King. This piece of news did not faze him at all. He continued to stare at the sky blankly. He felt some pity inside. If he could come and assist them, it would definitely be of great assistance. In terms of cultivation alone, it was very likely for him to be the highest in the 9 provinces, standing between demon kings and demon emperors. However, it was best if he did not disturb him right now. As a result, he extended his hand, and a string of skull prayer beads wrapped around his wrist. He flapped his wings and took off. First Father's clone, wait for me. The little phoenix caught up. What do you mean First Father's clone? Li Qingshan shot a glance at him. Don't tell me that's not right. Don't follow me. You haven't even gone through 3 heavenly tribulations. Why are you joining in the fun? Go play with your younger sister. Li Qingshan ordered. Although the little phoenix was unwilling, he did not dare to talk back to Li Qingshan, even if it was only First Father's clone. He could only turn around and fly away. As the wind blew past his ears, Li Qingshan looked back. Gu Yinying caught up with him and walked beside him. She smiled and said, I can't not join in the fun. Yes, but be careful. This battle is very dangerous. Li Qingshan solemnly reminded her. Even a great cultivator might not be able to protect themselves in such a battle. Thank you for your concern, Gu Yinying said. I was worrying too much. With your ability to sail with the wind and preserve your strength, it would be strange if there was any danger, Li Qingshan said with a smile. Please don't make me sound so bad. In any case, I have helped you a few times. Gu Yinying said. Yes. I will never forget Commander Gu's great kindness. Li Qingshan said with a smile. Suddenly he felt the skull prayer beads on his wrist tighten. Yes, it was indeed not the time to joke around. Gu Yinying let out a long laugh and sped up, flying off. After hearing Li Qingshan's words, Jin Fugui and Yu Wuyang looked solemn. They looked at each other and felt bitter. It was hard enough to deal with the flying locust king. Now the locust plague was over, and the demon plague was even more ferocious than the locust plague. The Qing province was really full of disasters. If they knew the current situation in Thousand Ghosts Abyss, and the approaching army of Yu Kingdom, how would they feel? Are you going? Jin Fugui sighed and asked Yu Wuyang. Yes, Yu Wuyang said decisively. As a descendant of the military school, how could he be afraid of a battle? The Naraka realm is not as fun as the Ashura realm, Jin Fugui said. The position of Golden Eagle Commander, given to him by Great Xia, was not worth the risk. I didn't ask you to go. Since you are going, how can I not go? Be careful on the way. Take a rest. A smile appeared on Yu Wuyang's stern face. In the blink of an eye, only Helicoverpa Rosa was left. She looked at the Golden Cicada Spirit King and wanted to say something but stopped. In the end, she returned to the underground without saying anything. Suddenly, everyone heard the sound of cicadas and looked back. The sound was similar to the chant of Devanaga, but it was completely different. It was more exquisite, like a long song, resounding through the sky and the earth. There was no subtle and profound zen, only indescribable sorrow. A long song was a cry. The sound of cicadas was getting louder and louder, almost beyond human hearing. Chapter 1125. The monks of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga stood on the top of the mountain and gazed into the distance. Within the surging demon chi, they could only make out a blurry silhouette of Great Buddha Mountain, and it was enveloped by an even deeper, greater shadow. That was the shadow of the army of 1 million demon folk, which surged towards the Green Province cauldron in the sky with a roar. At the very front was the towering figure of the war demon, commanding the army of 1,000,000 demons. Even from here, their battle roars could be heard clearly. An ink dragon swam around the demonfolk army, moving between the demon kings. Its body had been sliced and ripped apart countless times, even shattering to pieces, but it would reform again and again, except it seemed much weaker. He had already done everything he could to keep the demon kings busy, but there were just far too many demon kings. They all supported one another, making it difficult to kill a single one of them. If it were not for his undying body, he probably would have died here a long time ago. His only hope was above the clouds. Chu Lai King controlled the Green Province cauldron, and did everything he could to suppress the surging demon chi. He also sucked Little, and into the illusion of the Green Province. Little and shook the Chaos Soul Bell, forcing the War Demon King to use a battle roar to fend off the bell, preventing him from wreaking havoc as he pleased. Li Qingshan swung his demise-frenzied blade, constantly attacking the War Demon King and stopping his advance. As for the 4 monk kings, even with the unraging monk using the demon suppression statuary, the demon kings still hunted them down everywhere, running into danger time and time again. Even protecting themselves became an issue. As for the Dragon King of the Sea's strength weakened, even more demon kings managed to free up their hands and rush over to support the War Demon Hun. They did not attack Li Qingshan. Instead, they circled around to the back and directly attacked Chu Lai King. Once the illusion of the Green Province was destroyed, the power of the Demon Cavern would no longer be suppressed. Whether it was the Demonfolk army or the Demon Kings, they could unleash their full strength. No one could stop them. Li Qingshan's heart sank. No matter how powerful he was, he could not split himself up. He had no time to support Chu Lai King. Chu Lai's expression was solemn as he stood in the center of the Green Province's illusory realm. The illusory realm suddenly became corporeal. Mountains, rivers, grass, trees, and even the demon kings entered. Immediately, lightning flashed, thunder roared, mountains collapsed, and the earth cracked. One of the demon kings suddenly became sluggish, and his expression became distorted. It was as if he was suffering from some illness, or had some problems with his cultivation. Coincidentally, a series of lightning bolts struck down, and there was a loud boom. His body was smashed to pieces. The other demon kings didn't dare to be aggressive anymore. They turned around and patrolled the borders of the illusion before slowly advancing. These foreign invaders would be suppressed by the laws of heaven and earth of the world of the 9 states, and the illusion of the green state derived from the green state cauldron was the condensation of the power of the laws. At this moment, it displayed astonishing might, suppressing the attacks of the demon kings like an unbreakable fortress. However, this was one of the few great demon dens in the world. The demonic energy that soared into the skies was enough to easily contaminate an area of 1,000 miles. As the bridgehead for the invasion of the demon region, how could it be so easily suppressed? Boom! The sword and the saber clashed again. Battle Devil Hun roared and swung his sword down. Li Qingshan flew backward. A few strands of his scarlet hair fluttered down. After borrowing the chi of the great army, the Battle Devil Hun's strength had climbed to an unbelievable level. Even more terrifyingly, he could control this power with composure. Both his battle techniques and his battle spirit were flawless. Li Qingshan tried various innate abilities, but he struggled to kill him, even though he could cause some damage. But Battle Devil Hun glanced at the sword in his hand. It was covered in nicks and slashes. Dark, demonic light flowed into the sword from his arm, and the nicks and slashes vanished in the blink of an eye as if they were brand new. Li Qingshan, I admit your strength is extraordinary, but it's just a pity that you're too stupid. Stupid? What do you mean? Li Qingshan said. The battle in the Clear River Prefecture had just come to an end, so he was more than happy to stall for time. You've chosen the wrong side. Don't forget that you're a demon. Your battle is meaningless. If this world becomes a demon domain, there will only be benefits for you. With your talent and strength, you can completely join the War Demon clan and become a true war demon. This world is far too weak. It can't even express its will. If you come to my side and fight for the demon domain, you'll understand what heaven's will is. There will be endless benefits. Battle Devil Hun tried to persuade him. He knew that even if he defeated Li Qingshan, it would be very difficult to kill him here. He would become a huge stumbling block. If he could pull him into the demon domain's camp, he would become a great source of assistance. At the same time, there would be even more opportunities to kill him. That does sound very reasonable. Let me consider it. Li Qingshan rubbed his chin, as if he was seriously considering switching sides. Oh no, that kid's going to switch sides, said a monk king. But upon further thought, what switch could a demon possibly have? He won't, the unraging monk said firmly. Before he could say anything else, there was a great boom, and the furious guardian king was smashed apart by the combined efforts of the demon kings. In the past, there was a foolish war demon who was bewitched by these bald donkeys here, embarking on the evil path of becoming enemies with the demon domain. If you mend your ways and join the war demon clan, it'll be quite the story. Battle Devil Hun added. He believed that Li Qingshan would make the right choice. Whenever the demon domain invaded, there would always be a lack of guides like him. I wonder what kind of position I'll receive if I join your side, Li Qingshan asked. In the vanguard, you'll be second only to me, said Battle Devil Hun. However, he was the only one who could control the army, so there was no difference. That doesn't sound very tempting. Li Qingshan shook his head. Although Qiongqi had also said he was second only to me, his status was nowhere near as great as Battle Devil Hun's. He smiled. What if I want to replace you? You. Killing intent flashed across Battle Devil Hun's face. Alright, very well. You're still trying to buy time when you've already come this far? But I'm the same. You'll definitely lose this battle. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to raise your head and take a look. In an instant, the illusion of Qing province was gradually infected by the demonic qi. In the illusion, an oriole was chirping on a branch. Its feathers suddenly turned pitch black, and its body twisted and expanded. It let out a mournful cry that was no longer pleasing to the ears. The other mountains, vegetation, flowers, birds, fishes, and insects all began to demonify. The demon kings approached the green province cauldron closer and closer. The black scar that represented the demon cauldron on the cauldron grew larger, and vein-like patterns spread out. The demonfolk army had already reached the city walls. Although they had been disturbed by the bell and slowed down drastically, they still approached the illusion of the green province. As long as they surged forward, Li Qingshan would never be able to stop them, and the illusion of the green province would not be able to suppress them either. This battle would be considered a defeat. The Dauntless Monk and the Dauntless Monk flew several hundred kilometers away from Great Buddha Mountain before breaking free from the pursuit of a few demon kings. They were both exhausted and covered in wounds. The other two monk kings were already dead. They had blown up their sariras to stop the advance of the demonfolk army, creating a chance for them to survive. However, within the surging demon qi, even the light from their explosions seemed so feeble. They looked at Great Buddha Mountain reluctantly. Don't tell me we've really lost? Li Qingshan was completely unworried. He yawned and stretched. You'll definitely lose this battle. If you don't believe me, you're welcome to listen carefully. Chapter 1126. The golden star on the horizon lit up before turning into a golden streak that tore through the sky. What's that? It's so fast. The unraging monk and the dauntless monk were surprised. They had never seen such a swift streak of light in their lives. What was even stranger was that the golden light was vaguely similar to the Buddhist light. Had other Buddhist cultivators come to reinforce them? In the next moment, they also heard cicadas. They looked at one another. Don't tell me. The Golden Cicada Spirit King. The first to mention this name was actually the war demon Hun, which demonstrated just how deep his understanding of the 9 provinces was. His expression was rather stern, but he said in disdain, "What a joke. Do you really think you can turn defeat into victory, just by being a mere demon king? You'll know once you try," Li Qingshan said. The golden light paused and stopped above Great Buddha Mountain. The golden eyes gazed down at the mountain, but they did not spread their wings or fly into the sky. Only the cicadas' cries grew louder and louder, almost shrill. The war demon's roar suddenly stopped. The cicada's cry seemed tangible, pouring into his mouth and blocking all other sounds. His body glowed with golden light. The bell immediately grew clear again. For a moment, the demonic army fell into chaos. They began killing one another again. Blood flowed like rivers, raining down from the sky. The gigantic war demon shuddered and immediately blurred, collapsing even faster within the cicada's cries. Attack. Anyone who hesitates will be executed without mercy, the war demon Hun ordered. The demon kings ignored the power of the laws of the world and charged towards the Green Province cauldron as hard as they could despite the lightning, thunder, hail, and rain. The Green Province cauldron became more and more contaminated by the demon chi. It could no longer suppress the surging demon chi anymore. Instead, it was pushed upwards. Even Chu Lai King could not hold on any longer. There was a flash of golden light. A handsome, young monk descended from above, standing on the Green Province cauldron. His kasaya fluttered in the wind, giving off an air of nobility that surpassed the Green Province. He brought his palms together and chanted, Amitba. His clear voice turned into a ring of golden light and swept out. The dozen or so demon kings were all sent flying, even suppressing the demon chi's contamination. The cicada's cries never stopped. The war demon Hun also charged over with the other demon kings, his horse galloping. Unstoppable. Li Qingshan stood with his saber horizontally. He could not let them step into the illusion of Qingzhou. Although the golden cicada spirit king's current realm was high, he had already consumed a lot of power when he was going through the tribulation just now. It was impossible for him to compete with so many demon kings in terms of energy consumption. Suddenly, a black figure floated beside him and formed a human figure. He stood beside Li Qingshan with his sword in hand. Li Qingshan gave him a sidelong glance. Are you all right? He didn't expect the Dragon King of the Sea to answer, but to his surprise, the Dragon King of the Sea said, Very well. That's good. Li Qingshan laughed. The two demon monarchs raised their sabers and swords at the same time, facing the demons. Earth Force Field. Li Qingshan's eyes were bright and dark, with himself as the center. The surrounding force field kept changing, contracting, and expanding, causing the demon kings to move forward and backward involuntarily. Although they couldn't focus their power on a single demon king to completely control their movements, they were able to instantly tear apart the encirclement. This caused a subtle time difference in the joint attack. The fastest was still Battle Devil Hun. His legs had already disappeared. He faintly merged with the demon horse beneath him. Man and horse as one, he slashed with his sword. Die! At this moment, if Li Qingshan gave up on controlling the force field and allowed the demon kings to display their advantage in numbers, victory would be decided in an instant. But if he didn't care about it, the power of this sword would definitely not be able to withstand it head-on. The black shadow floated over. Emma Wuhan turned his body and waved his sword to meet the Battle Devil Hun. That 3 feet green sword seemed so weak compared to the huge sword, but at the moment when the two swords collided, the black color spread out, following the huge sword to the Battle Devil Hun, pulling him into the painting. This was the Dragon King of the Sea's ultimate skill, Thousand Autumns painting. The reaction of the demon kings was also extremely fast. At the moment when they were disturbed by the Earth's force field, they displayed their strongest ultimate skills. Hundreds of eyes split open on their bodies, or condensed dark purple light balls between the 3 sharp horns on the top of their heads and so on. The terrifying demonic light that was enough to destroy a mountain pounced over like a landslide or a tsunami. The Dragon King of the Sea dragged Battle Devil Hun into the painting. Although he had the absolute advantage, he couldn't move freely anymore. And even if he could move, the Qingzhou cauldron couldn't. Chu Lai King had obviously reached his limit. Little and focused on activating the Chaos Soul Bell, while the Golden Cicada Spirit King used the cicadas chirping to suppress the Battle Devil Hun, while dealing with more than 10 demon kings. It was already very difficult. If there were more than 10 demon kings, the illusion of Qingzhou would definitely be broken. After the demon kings were demonized, although they didn't look like humans and looked more like demons, but in terms of scheming and craftiness, they were even stronger than ordinary human cultivators. This joint attack was determined to succeed. If anyone dared to block it, they would be annihilated in the face of this overwhelming power. regardless of whether they had bones of steel or a painting of 1,000 years. The Earth's force field had a strong effect on any physical object. However, the effect was not so obvious on light waves and airflow. However, Li Qingshan had always been very comprehensive. He stood guard in front of the illusion of the Green Province, without taking a single step back. His eyes suddenly became calm, as deep as the ocean. The terrifying demonic light was reflected in them. He spread his arms, and a smooth mirror surface unfurled before him. Last radiance of the setting sun. However, the terrifying demonic light bombarded the mirror, causing it to distort and cave in. It couldn't withstand such a fierce attack, and started to crack. Li Qingshan frowned and struck out with his palm. Return! Boom! With a loud bang, the mirror shattered and the demonic light exploded. The airwave swept out for thousands of miles, and cleared the heaven and earth. The surging demon chi was suppressed, and most of the mountain peak of Great Buddha Mountain was devoured by the demonic light. The Green Province cauldron was knocked high into the air by the shockwave. At least it was not directly attacked, so the illusion of the Green Province could be maintained. The painting shattered, and the war demon broke free. His body had already completely merged with the warhorse. He swung his sword and charged over without the slightest hesitation. Half of Li Qingshan's bones were exposed. He swung his blade and cut through the demonic light. Again! The cries of cicadas, the chimes of bells, battle cries, roars. All sorts of sounds gathered together and merged together, shaking up the surroundings. Buddhist light, demon chi, blade aura, sword light. All sorts of colors crisscrossed, flickering as they collided and dissolved. This was the collision of two worlds. But under the swaying of the chaotic soul bell, the demon folk army was on the brink of collapse very soon. The chaotic soul bell was originally more suited for dealing with ghouls. They were either walking corpses or possessed no bodies, so it was easy for them to fall into chaos. If it were used against regular cultivators, the effects would be drastically reduced. However, the twisted and absurd way of thinking that demon folk were born with made their very nature twisted and chaotic, which was why they were able to achieve something like this. Little Un tried fusing the Buddhist supreme technique, the chant of Devanaga, into the chimes to further restrain himself. The first to collapse was the war demon over 3,000 meters tall. As the demon folk army descended into a chaotic battle, it was no longer able to maintain its body, collapsing into surging demon chi. The cries of cicadas suddenly became louder and louder. A strand of coiling golden light seeped out of the surging demon chi like a soaring dragon or snake. It turned into over a dozen strands of golden light, and pierced through the demons. Even the demon kings could not respond in time. They all shuddered and were immobilized. Chapter 1127. How could Li Qingshan let go of such a good opportunity? The tiger stripes on his face spread, and formed a king character on his forehead. His hostility soared to the sky, as he performed the tiger demon's fury. At the same time, he was still in the state of battle demon's possession, and fanatic's end. Break! The demon fighter flew out with a look of disbelief, as if he had been punched in the face. In a trance, Li Qingshan's figure disappeared, and turned into a tiger demon with a blade in its mouth. He drew a red light, and in the next moment, he returned to his human form. He had already retracted his magical power. His bones were full of cracks, and his body was on the verge of collapse. He turned back and grinned. You've lost. Several demon kings were crushed and killed in one move. No, the demon fighter roared. They had such a great advantage. How could they lose to a few people? However, in the cultivation world, all power belonged to the individual. Quantity had never been able to compete with quality. Li Qingshan ignored the demon fighter's wails and said to Gu Yinying in the distance, Are you here to watch the show? Seeing that you guys are united and can cut through metal, I thought I didn't need to do anything. But all right. Gu Yinying rushed to Great Buddha Mountain and had been standing far away. Seeing the Dragon King of the Sea and Li Qingshan joining forces to fight against the enemy, she couldn't help but sigh and feel gratified. At this moment, he opened his jade folding fan and waved it from top to bottom, attracting the astral wind from outer space. Then, he waved it from bottom to top, raising the hot wind of hell and blowing it towards the group of demons. The golden cicada spirit king stood on the Qingzhou cauldron with no sadness or joy on his face. The invisible sound was like a golden light shuttling back and forth. Wherever it went, the demon kings trembled. Only a powerful battle demon like the demon fighter could barely resist the invasion of the cicada's sound. The wind whistled, and the cicada's loud and clear sound. The situation was gradually reversed. Li Qingshan felt the blazing phoenix fire in his heart rapidly healing the injuries on his body. If it was in the past, he could barely make one move by activating the state of triple burst. His body would immediately collapse. However, the fact that he was able to withdraw from this state, after such a long and arduous battle, was a testament to his strength. His Phoenix Nirvana Sutra was only a hair's breadth away from the 5th level. Once he broke through to the 5th stage of the Phoenix Nirvana Sutra, not only would he have another chance to use the Phoenix's Nirvana Sutra, but he would also be able to hold on for a while longer. Instead, he had completely balanced his 4 heavenly fiend god transformation, and his strength would reach a whole new realm. This battle was the key to breaking through. Unknowingly, the ringing gradually faded away. Almost all of the devil army had fallen into a frenzy. More than half of them were dead or injured, and the rest were still killing each other fiercely. Rivers of blood flowed everywhere. If there was no external intervention, it would be impossible for them to regain their consciousness. Little An heaved a sigh of relief, and put away the Chaos Soul Bell. With a wave of his left hand, the skull prayer beads spun, and formed the skeleton fiend formation, surrounding the Qingzhou cauldron. They blocked the attacks of the demon kings, and resisted the invasion of the demonic qi, protecting the tottering Qingzhou cauldron. With a wave of his right hand, a river of blood surged out from the Blood Sea banner. It hung upside down and sucked the million demon folk into it. First, it used the dead to fuel the water, before devouring the living, growing larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, the river of blood expanded by 100 times, surging like a dragon of blood. Even the demon generals and demon commanders could not escape the fate of being devoured. Then, it soared back and coiled around the Green Ruins illusory realm, protecting the Green Province cauldron like a fortress. Little An wrapped his hands around the air and slowly coiled them. The endless sea of blood and the skeleton fiend formation clashed. Only now did the demon kings attacking the Qingzhou cauldron realize the situation. They wanted to charge out, but they discovered that the sky was filled with the color of blood and fire. The devil army of 1,000,000 was stripped of their flesh and blood in the sea of blood, reduced to skeletons. With a series of whooshing sounds, the skull prayer beads surged towards them. The skull prayer beads would turn into skeleton fiends from time to time, cackling as they lunged towards them. This sight was basically like the cycle of reincarnation in hell. It left the demon kings pale in shock. Chu Lai King gazed at Little An's back. The Blood Sea banner ruffled, the white monk's robes billowed, and her long hair drifted in the wind. Her figure was not particularly large, but it possessed the supreme dignity of ruling over everything. Suddenly, he felt like it was unreal. "This is my daughter." A strange light flashed through the golden cicada spirit king's eyes too. He doubted whether he had made the right decision in luring her to the Chan monastery of Devanaga. However, he immediately dismissed this thought. He could sense that the Buddhist nature she possessed was not fake. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk watched this unfold. They had no idea what to say. The effects of the bell were powerful, but it was still invisible after all. It did not possess such a great impact. Was this the power of the enemy of Buddha? Senior brother, this enemy of Buddha is probably not something we can deal with, but looking at her words and actions, she doesn't seem like the enemy of Buddha. The unraging monk deliberated over his words. He was open-minded and unconstrained. He would not simply treat her as the enemy of Buddha, just because of the path of white bone and great beauty. Whether she's the enemy of Buddha or not has nothing to do with us anymore. Even if the imperial advisor of the left comes in person, what can we do? The dauntless monk shook his head helplessly, coupled with the extremely vicious Li Qingshan, who could still deal with her, who would still be bold enough to deal with her. Buddhism was particular about fearless sacrifice, but that was not just throwing away one's life for nothing. And just like what the unraging monk had said, she was not like the soaring locust king, massacring the masses and massacring them. In the blink of an eye, the tables were turned. The demon kings were cut down one by one, turning into a part of the boundless sea of blood. Little Anne gave up on her control over the skull prayer beads, allowing them to attack freely as skeleton fiends. She gripped the blood sea banner with both hands and leapt up, swinging it hard. A fan-shaped streak of blood-red light swept through the sky, and the two demon kings vanished. The blood sea banner danced about in her hand. Streaks of blood-red light swept through the sky, and the demon kings fell into the blood sea banner one by one, struggling and tossing about in the blood sea banner. The sticky blood stuck to their bodies firmly, spreading throughout their entire bodies. If they wanted to break free, they would have to contend against the entire sea of blood. Skeletons of various sizes crawled all over their colossal bodies after demonification, nibbling away at them bit by bit like ants swallowing elephants. The blood sea banner's effects had always been extremely limited. Although it could create a space of its own, the first thing she needed to do after obtaining resources was to increase her cultivation, then refine the Buddha-slaying sword, and then the skull prayer beads. The resources given to the blood sea banner were negligible, so it was unable to unleash much of its effects. However, after devouring an army of 1,000,000 demons, the blood sea banner's power reached an unprecedented level. It demonstrated the terrifying might of the boundless sea of blood, the shore of which there is no turning back. Under the support of the Golden Cicada Spirit King, and Gu Yenying, Li Qingshan, and the Dragon King of the Sea had slain over a dozen demon kings consecutively. The war devil Hun had basically become all alone, no longer as mighty as when he first arrived. Right now, whether or not he could break free had even become a problem. Why is it like this? The war devil Hun was filled with reluctance. At this moment, a voice suddenly rang out in his ear. Do you want to win? Who are you? Come refine me. Kill them all. A strange, twisted sword shot out of thin air, appearing before the war devil Hun. He grabbed the hilt instinctively. Chapter 1128. Oh no, Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. Originally, he thought the Forsaken Immortal Sword had probably fled to the demon domain after not appearing for so long, but he never expected it to still appear. And at the most critical moment, Chu Lai King and the others who had witnessed the Forsaken Immortal Sword's power all shuddered inside. They experienced an ominous feeling, as if a great disaster was about to befall them. In the cultivation community, absolute disparities in strength were often not something numbers could make up for. For example, an army of 1,000,000 demon folk was nothing before Little Anne. The Forsaken Immortal Sword's own strength had already surpassed Li Qingshan and the others. If the battle demon Hun was added to the mix, it would probably reach an unimaginable level. Stop him! Li Qingshan lunged over, and Little Anne followed from the left and right. The terminal wildflower blade and the Buddha-slaying sword slashed down at the same time. The edges of the blades revolved with black shockwaves, and the edges shone with golden light. Either one of them could easily kill a demon king. Come refine me. You'll possess unprecedented power. The Forsaken Immortal Sword's enticing voice echoed through the battle demon Hun's head. The reason why it hadn't made a move and had endured until now was because as a sword, even if it possessed extraordinary strength, it had to bear the innate shackles. It had to be wielded by someone. Regardless of whether it was the sword master or the sword slave, there had to be someone to hold the hilt of the sword. With its own strength, it could reign supreme for a time, but it could not sustain a prolonged battle. Just now, after destroying the demon suppression tower, it had basically used up all the power it had obtained from Elder Tion. If it struck out recklessly, it would be in danger of being captured, which was why it had hidden itself in the demon cavern. It was waiting for an opportunity. Now the opportunity had finally arrived. You want me to be your sword slave? The battle demon Hun was filled with caution. He could sense the abnormality of the sword in his hand. It was definitely not a weapon that a demon king could casually wield. No. It's just a partnership. If we work together, killing all of these people is nothing difficult. Or do you want to die here for nothing? Do you want to become a great joke, a pitiful failure? The Forsaken Immortal Sword's soul spared no effort in persuading him. It was filled with urgent desire, This fighting devil mix was simply the best choice. His strength was more than a level higher than Elder Tion's, and he could unleash even more of its power. At the same time, he did not have the ability to become the sword master, so he could find an opportunity to turn him into a sword slave during the intense battle. It was not a difficult task. If it was a normal day, no matter what, Battle Devil Hun would not easily refine the abandoned immortal sword. In other words, no demon king would take such a risk. Even if they wanted to refine it, they would have to be fully prepared. No one was willing to become a sword slave and end up being devoured by the sword. However, in the current situation, there was no time for hesitation. The communication was completed in the blink of an eye. As the sword and saber slashed down, he said decisively, "All right." He tossed aside the large sword in his hand, which turned to dust in midair. He gripped the abandoned immortal sword tightly with both hands, and it suddenly gave off a dazzling demonic light. Boom! The terminus frenzied flower blade, and the Buddha-slaying sword slashed at the demonic light at the same time. The demonic light suddenly transformed into a sword light that expanded and contracted indefinitely. It was actually able to resist the sharp edge of the blades. It was the forsaken immortal sword light. Hehe, your time of death has come. The voices of Battle Devil Hun and the forsaken immortal sword soul overlapped, and the surrounding void distorted and collapsed. Countless tiny cracks appeared. Li Qingshan's expression became increasingly solemn. This meant that Battle Devil Hun's power had already surpassed the limits of what this world could contain. If it were not for the fact that they were above the demon's lair, it would definitely have caused a huge change in the weather. He had only seen such a scene when Qiongqi had descended little and waved the blood sea banner, sweeping them into the sea of blood. The boundless sea of blood surged, and layers of it piled up to form a semi-sphere that enveloped them in the center. Countless skeletons surged forward, but before they could even approach, they were shattered by the expanding and contracting sword light. Little and did not expect the blood sea banner to be able to deal with Battle Devil Hun. He only hoped that it could slightly delay Battle Devil Hun from refining the abandoned immortal sword. How is it? Li Qingshan asked. It's no good. The blood sea banner can't trap him, and we can't stop him from refining the sword. It won't take long. Before Little and had even finished speaking, the blood sea banner erupted with streaks of light. The sea of blood exploded loudly, and a streak of light rushed out in an unstoppable manner. Once Battle Devil Hun broke free, cutting through the illusion of the green province that was on the brink of collapse would be a piece of cake. Even the Golden Cicada Spirit King would not be able to stop him. Once the illusion of the green province was broken, the demon's lair would no longer be suppressed. Very soon, the region of 500 kilometers would be reduced to demonic soil. Let alone defeating Battle Devil Hun, even breaking free would be difficult. As for the Dragon King of the Sea, Li Qingshan, Little Anne, and the Golden Cicada Spirit King, they were still fine. They all had their own methods to protect themselves, but Chu Lai King, the Dauntless Monk, the Unraging Monk, and Gu Yining would probably die here. Even the monks of the monastery who had yet to make it too far away, or even all the living creatures within a range of 500 kilometers, would fall into the demon's claws. Were the humans and demons of the Green Province still unable to stop the invasion of the demon domain after a bitter battle? If we want to break free, we have to do it now. It'll be too late if we hesitate any longer, said Little N. Everyone, please back away. I'll deal with him, said the Golden Cicada Spirit King. Fellow Golden Cicada probably isn't this demon's opponent. Li Qingshan was still being polite when he said that. The Golden Cicada Spirit King had just failed his tribulation in the first place. First, the soaring Locust King's claw pierced his heart, and then he went through a great battle. At the same time, he had to help Chu Lai King suppress the demon Qi. Chapter 1129. Fellow Qingshan. The Golden Cicada Spirit King was mildly surprised. Chu Lai King and the others were stunned as well. Li Qingshan was all alone, so how could he contend against the battle demon spirit that had refined the forsaken immortal sword? Or perhaps, not a single person or demon here could do that. That was basically no different from committing suicide. He has his own confidence. Little Anne said, but she seemed more like she was comforting herself. There was probably no one in the world who worried about Li Qingshan more than her. But there was also no one who trusted Li Qingshan more than her. She sucked in a gentle breath. Everyone, please suppress the demon cavern quickly. The unraging monk was the first to step forward. He used the demon suppression statuary and lifted a demon suppression tower high into the air. It grew larger and larger until it became like a small mountain, hurling it towards the demon cavern desperately. Stimulated by the demon chi, the demon suppression tower doubled in size again, crushing down viciously. However, compared to the colossal demon cavern, it still seemed much smaller. The golden cicada spirit king brought his palms together and unfurled his cicada wings. He trembled like a golden mist, and the chirping of cicadas rang out once more, spreading out like it was tangible. The dauntless monk, Gu Yinying, and even Jin Fugui, Yu Wuyang, and the others who had arrived afterwards exerted their strength together, powering the black sand and atmospheric winds to suppress the churning demon chi. Chu Lai King ingested a pill and slowly pushed the green province cavern down. But at this moment, the demon chi suddenly surged even more violently, lifting up the green province cavern instead. Clearly, a powerful demon folk had taken action in the demon chi on the other side of the demon cavern. Afterwards, battle cries rang out in the demon cavern again. Everyone's expressions changed. Only then did they remember that the army of the demon domain they had annihilated with everything they had was only the vanguard. Now everyone was utterly exhausted. Even the green province cavern was on the verge of collapse from the demon chi. They could not help but feel a hint of despair. How were they supposed to stop them this time? Little Anne sucked in a deep breath and said loudly, "Your Majesty, you've watched the battle for so long. Can you show yourself?" Chu Lai King's heart shivered. He followed Little Anne's gaze. At the far end of the world, there was a floating mountain of clouds. Following Little Anne's voice, the mountain of clouds gradually dispersed, leaving nothing behind. However, the rainbow light in the air quickly twisted and trembled, revealing a shimmering silver dragon king. It was heading straight for Great Buddha Mountain. Everyone was above the demon cavern, where the two worlds intersected. Their senses were heavily affected, and they were focused on fending off the demon folk, so none of them actually sensed it. Chu Lai King felt bitter in his heart. This was really a case of when it rains, it pours. The Green Province was plagued with so many disasters. The long-awaited reinforcements from the Dragon Province never came. Instead, their mortal enemies came. The Silver Dragon King approached, and the King of Southern Yu announced loudly, "Chu Lai King, the Chu Empire's end has arrived." The expressions of the dauntless monk, Yu Wuyang, Jin Fugui, and so on changed too. "Your Majesty, assist me in suppressing the demon cavern." Little Anne did not seem to hear the King of Southern Yu's declaration of war. "What did you say?" The King of Southern Yu was taken aback, but he was also amused. "Fellow Little Anne, didn't you hear me? I've come to destroy the Chu Empire. Even if I've helped you just now, don't push your luck." If it were not for the fact that he was hiding in the Cloud Mountains and saw the terrifying might of Little Anne's attacks, he would have directly attacked her and shown her his determination to destroy the Chu Empire. He waved his hand. "Since you've already converted to Buddhism, this has nothing to do with you. You better back off to one side. Father, please pass on the throne to me. Please pass the throne to me." Shaoan turned to fierce King Chu and said, "All right." Chu Lai King did not hesitate at all. Right now, the only person who could save the Chu Empire was his daughter. As long as he could protect the legacy of his ancestors, it did not matter whether she was the enemy of Buddha or the child of Buddha. From today onwards, Princess Darkmoon shall inherit the position of King Chu. She shall be known as the Dark King of Chu. Dark King of Chu, Little Anne murmured before saying to the King of Southern Yu, "It has something to do with me now. You're forcing my hand." The King of Southern Yu frowned. "Have you come this time to take over the Green Province, Your Majesty?" Little Anne asked. The King of Southern Yu sank into thought. No, the Green Province was much smaller than the Mist Province. Its resources were not as plentiful as the Mist Province either. Even its greatest advantage, its population, had declined drastically after the disaster. However, before this, the king of Southern Yu was still very interested in ruling over the Green Province. Not only was this the ambition of the previous kings, but the population only needed a century to recover. However, after witnessing the sights of the myriad ghosts abyss and Great Buddha Mountain, he had already completely changed his mind. He had to fend off the attacks of the hungry ghost realm and the demon domain at the same time. Only a complete idiot would be interested in ruling over the Green Province. Then you've come to destroy the Chu Empire? Little An asked again. Exactly, said the king of Southern Yu. He had come all the way here not to destroy the Chu Empire. Was he here for a holiday? All right, then, in the name of the king of Chu, I declare that from today onwards, the Chu Empire no longer exists. It has officially been destroyed, said Little An. Let alone the king of Southern Yu, even Chu Lai King was stunned. The Chu Empire that had existed for tens of thousands of years had actually been destroyed in the time it took to utter a single sentence? What do you mean by that? The king of Southern Yu asked. All right, you've already destroyed the Chu Empire. Are you satisfied with this result? Or are you saying you're determined to pull up the weeds by the roots, even killing me, the ruler of a destroyed empire? Little An said. The king of Southern Yu smiled bitterly. You should know that I've never wanted to become enemies with you and Qing Shan. I don't agree, Chu Lai King said furiously. The Green Province cauldron trembled. King of Southern Yu, if you want to destroy my Chu Empire, then let's perish together. It's not like my Yu kingdom will be the first to suffer anyway. The king of Southern Yu obviously would not be threatened like that. Just as they were about to draw their swords, Little An called out, all of you shut your mouths. Her furious call that contained the chant of Devanaga rang out like a great bell, deafening even the deaf. You two short-sighted fellows. You call yourselves kings in vain. What are you fighting over in the land of the snail's horn? The demon domain and the hungry ghost realm have invaded at the same time. The 9 provinces are on the verge of destruction. Do you want to become ghouls or demon folk? Little An had always been quiet and ethereal. Apart from Li Qingshan, no one had ever seen her anger before. Now that she was furious, the world fell silent. Well said, the Golden Cicada Spirit King praised. Please reconsider, fellow cultivators. Fine then. You're the king of Chu after all. Chu Lai King was helpless. He calmed down his anger, and also thought it through. The kingdom of Chu was just a name at the end of the day. As long as the Ji clan was preserved, couldn't they restore the kingdom? The king of Southern Yu also considered Little An's words. Neither the hungry ghost realm, nor the demon domain were easy to deal with. When demons and ghouls ran amok, even if the Mist Province wanted to remain safe, it would be impossible. Fine then. I've come to help you suppress the demon cavern. I'm just helping you. Thank you, your majesty. Little An bowed and thought to herself, learning how Qing Shan speaks from time to time seems to be quite useful. She was not actually angry. She was already prepared to leave. Although she was merciful and wanted to suppress the demon cavern and save countless lives. Even if the entire 9 provinces were added together, they were not as important as Li Qingshan alone. Chapter 1130. As soon as Li Qingshan stepped into the sea of blood, flashes of light filled his vision. He instinctively crossed his arms in front of his chest, and stabbing pain followed closely. The edge of the sword pierced his arms, and the tip plunged into his chest. His skin turned light green, and the muscles on his arms bulged. He used the strength of the ox demon to block the sword light. You dare to come and die? Battle Devil Hun and the abandoned celestial sword's voice overlapped, their eyes filled with killing intent. Li Qingshan looked at them calmly. Even if you become a slave and lose your sense of self, do you still have to win? Battle Devil Hun's heart trembled. His compatibility with the abandoned celestial sword was disrupted. No one would be willing to become a slave, let alone a sword. Shut up. The sword pierced deeply into Li Qingshan's body. Even the ox demon forges its skin couldn't block it, and cracks appeared on it. As an enemy, you are not worthy of my respect. Li Qingshan grinned, full of contempt. Die! Battle Devil Hun roared, pushing Li Qingshan forward. The abandoned celestial sword's chi exploded, mincing Li Qingshan's organs and crushing his indestructible tiger bones. The sword light flashed, and Li Qingshan passed by. Li Qingshan glanced back, and his body shattered loudly, turning into phoenix flames that filled the sky. With a phoenix cry, the phoenix danced, and the flames retracted, turning back into Li Qingshan's body. A pair of red eyes stared at Battle Devil Hun, as if saying, "It's not over yet." Battle Devil Hun held his sword and stood on his horse, casting aside all other thoughts. In his eyes, there was only Li Qingshan's existence. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to kill him. Let's see how many times you can resurrect. Every time you resurrect, I will kill you. Every time you resurrect, I will kill you 10 times, until your soul is destroyed and you are beyond redemption. Nirvana rebirth was a powerful divine ability, but in the face of absolute power, it was just a matter of time. Li Qingshan also understood and smiled. Don't worry, this is the last time. One more time, and he would turn into an egg, which was no different from being killed. This was also the limit of the number of Nirvana rebirths he could achieve as a demon king. Even if he broke through to the 5th layer of the Phoenix realm, it would not increase. This was the true final battle. Then die. Battle Devil Hun waved his sword. The twisting and changing sword aura shot towards Li Qingshan from an unimaginable angle. Clang! Li Qingshan cut through the streak of light with his blade. His mind was as tranquil as the ocean. Only with the divination of the spirit turtle and his instincts for battle did he manage to block the attack. The strange sword chi it contained made his whole body tremble. The next moment, the real sword edge slashed in front of him, almost without any warning. The spirit turtle's profound shell appeared and shattered. Ox demon forges its hide tear. The edge of the sword collided with the tiger bone, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Only when the tip of the sword pierced into the tiger's bone did it stop. Boom! Li Qingshan fell into the sea of blood, stirring up huge waves. Battle Devil Hun followed him like a shadow. The sea of blood surged over, shattering when it came within 300 meters of him, spraying blood everywhere. The skulls cackled as they assembled into the skeleton demon formation, attempting to stop Battle Devil Hun. Battle Devil Hun did not even look at them. With a swing of the sword, the 3 skulls blocking his way were split in half silently. They erupted with surging samadhi flames of white bone, illuminating the gloomy sea of blood. Battle Devil Hun charged out of the sea of fire and laughed madly. What's wrong, Li Qingshan? Is this all you've got? How pitiful. It was no longer possible to tell whether this was Battle Devil Hun's voice, or the Forsaken Immortal's voice. He swung his sword high into the air and swung down violently. The deep sea of blood was split in half by the twisting streak of light. Li Qingshan gritted his teeth as he stood within it. He swung his blade again, barely managing to block another attack. A crack appeared on the blade. No, you're not his opponent. The wildflower sword soul could not help but say. Are you afraid? Li Qingshan smiled. The wildflower sword soul was speechless. As an Azura divine weapon, it was impossible for her to admit that she was afraid. She knew that as a weapon, she was destined to face such an outcome. But when the day came, she still wanted to continue living. She did not want to accept such a fate. It's okay, I'm afraid too, Li Qingshan said calmly. He was also afraid of death. Who was not afraid of death? However, this was the path he had chosen, a path that would bet his life on. Even if he was afraid, he would not hesitate. Battle Devil Hun rapidly approached, like a god of death descending. The shadow of death enveloped him. This was the first time he had been so close to death since becoming a monster king. However, his heart blazed with the desire to live. So he flapped his wings and soared into the sky, brandishing his blade as he did his best to meet Battle Devil Hun. Shaoan was extremely nervous. She desperately powered the Blood Sea banner and skull prayer beads to interfere with the War Demon Hun's movements, but it was basically useless. She forcefully resisted entering the Sea of Blood, as she understood very well that it was impossible for her Buddha-slaying sword to land a hit on the War Demon Hun. Instead, she would be heavily injured by the Forsaken Immortal sword. Li Qingshan would be distracted, which would instead lead to negative effects. She unconsciously bit her lip, not even noticing that blood had seeped out. No, it was not enough. She had to become even stronger. The wildflower sword and the demon sword separated as soon as they came into contact. Li Qingshan was once again sent flying. A terrible wound appeared on his chest, spreading from his left shoulder to his right. It was so deep that bone could be seen. If it were not for the fact that his tiger bones were hard, he would have been cut in half. Before he could recover from his injuries, Battle Devil Hun followed him like a shadow. He was still a hair away from the 5th layer of the Phoenix transformation, but he had no time to consider where this hair was. Roar! A tiger's roar shook the heavens and earth, containing incomparable rage. The Battle Devil banner fluttered against the wind. Blade light flashed. Li Qingshan unleashed his full power and fought with Battle Devil. The blade light and sword shadows blurred their figures. In the end, only the sword wheel and the blade wheel could be seen clashing fiercely. From the sky to the sea of blood, and from the sea of blood to the sky, waves of sharp air currents shattered the sea of blood and tore through the void. Die! 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 Battle Devil Hun roared crazily. His expression was twisted and crazed. He displayed the Forsaken Immortal Sword's eccentric swordsmanship to its fullest. It was unknown how many times stronger he was than Elder Tian. In an instant, the Doomsday Frenzied blade was covered in sword marks. Li Qingshan was also covered in cuts and bruises. Blood splattered everywhere, turning into raging flames. Just maintaining this state of extreme power caused his body and soul to be on the verge of collapse. Death approached step by step. It was as if a dark abyss was dragging him into it, causing him to continuously fall. However, Li Qingshan felt that his heart was getting hotter and hotter. He was deeply rejecting death. The darker the darkness, the brighter the flames. The deeper he fell into the abyss, the more he spread his wings and soared. Die! Battle Devil Hun shouted. The edge of his sword cut through the blade wheel and ruthlessly slashed into Li Qingshan's body. Between life and death, a voice in Li Qingshan's heart became clearer and louder. It turned into a sonorous phoenix cry. Phoenix Nirvana, undying heart. The phoenix's wings suddenly spread out to their limits. The wingspan was astonishingly thousands of feet, and it glowed with a brilliant light. Phoenix transformation, 5th layer. Chapter 1131. The phoenix's glorious cry rang through the sea of blood, causing the millions of souls to experience a moment of peace as they gazed up at the undying divine bird. A flash of sternness flashed across the Battle Devil's face, which was immediately covered by madness and distortion. He swung his sword and cut through the sea of blood. The phoenix descended from above, pecking at the Battle Devil with its sharp beak. This was the blade in Li Qingshan's hand. The moment the blade and sword collided, dazzling light erupted and space shattered. With a rip, a huge gap appeared in the Blood Sea banner. Under the King of Southern Yu's assistance, everyone worked together to suppress the surging demon chi. The battle cries in the demon cavern grew louder and louder. At this crucial moment, the Battle Devil's appearance made everyone's expressions change. The strange, twisted Forsaken Immortal Sword was enough to instantly nullify all of their efforts. Li Qingshan suddenly tossed something high into the air, and a blood-red swirl blossomed in the air. It was the Azura field. He flew into it with a beautiful arc of light. The Battle Devil hesitated for a moment. In the past, he definitely would have destroyed Little and the others' plans to suppress the Azura field first. But now, the Forsaken Immortal Sword's madness had already sunk deep into his heart. His killing intent and hatred towards Li Qingshan occupied his mind, so he charged into the Azura field right after him. His vision was covered in a layer of blood red. It was different from sinking into the sea of blood. Instead, it was a warrior's song of blood. It called out the primal desire for slaughter in his heart, so his killing intent grew heavier and heavier. Li Qingshan stood with his back to him. The phoenix wings shrunk to normal size, and he exhaled gently. If the Battle Devil did not pursue him, then there would be nothing he could do. Hehe, are you finally afraid? Unfortunately, it's already too late. Once I kill you, I'll kill all the people you love, and those who love you. You'll understand the consequences of opposing me. The Battle Devil smiled viciously as his killing intent surged. Before he had even attacked, the blood-red swirl in the sky began to spin rapidly, like a single eye watching the battle. Then come. Li Qingshan turned around. The tip of his sword was already several feet away from his nose, and he flapped his wings. He retreated rapidly, but the tip of his sword struggled to cross the several feet. It was so close that it seemed like the distance between them. After cultivating to the 5th layer of the phoenix, his speed was not inferior to the battle devil Hun's. However, this was only the beginning. A revolution was taking place. The tilted scales were slowly recovering their balance. Water and fire, the spirit turtle and phoenix, even the gods and demons, in the blink of an eye, Li Qingshan had already retreated to the edge of the azure field. He could no longer retreat or dodge. The forsaken immortal sword would easily tear the azure field apart. He pressed his fingers together like a sword and pointed at the tip of the sword. Demo Hun's sinister smile became even sharper. The sharpness of the abandoned immortal sword was not something that could be blocked by flesh and blood. No matter how many divine arts he had, he would still be pierced by the sword. Li Qingshan didn't use any divine abilities. A wisp of flame ignited at the tip of his finger, and at the same time, a stream of water flowed out, coiling into the shape of a drill. Battle Devil Hun suddenly felt a strange power coming from the tip of the sword, which disintegrated his sword chi. He was shocked and became even more furious. He used all his strength and thrust his sword forward. Bang! It was as if thousands of fireworks had bloomed at the same time. In the resplendent light, Demo Hun flew back 5 kilometers. Li Qingshan crashed heavily into the invisible barrier behind him. A large crack appeared on the barrier. A drop of blood seeped out of the falling fingertip of his right hand. The sword chi pierced through his heart meridian and headed straight for his heart. Are you crazy? Use the blade. The wildflower blade soul roared. You'll shatter if you use it anymore. Take a break. Let me deal with the rest. Li Qingshan looked at the scarred end of the wildflower blade in his hand. He tossed it casually, and it stabbed into a distant mountain peak. Accept your fate. Demo Hun swung his sword and pounced forward. Fate. Li Qingshan smiled. He brought his fists together and chanted. Ox. Phoenix. Tiger. Tortoise. Every word was incomparably solemn and heavy. It was as if they were separated by a long distance, but they were chanted in an instant. The illusions of Ox Demon, Phoenix, Tiger Demon, and Spirit Tortoise appeared above and below him. They spun rapidly and formed a blurry circle of light. Li Qingshan felt power he had never felt before fill his body and soul. He had ox horns and ox hooves, phoenix wings and phoenix feathers, tiger teeth and tiger claws, turtle back and turtle eyes. All sorts of transformations gathered on him. In that moment, he was the ox demon and the tiger demon, the spirit turtle and the phoenix. But after balancing out all of his divine and demonic natures, he was still Li Qingshan. So he stretched out his left hand, and the unpredictable blade fell into his hand. Blood splattered everywhere, but he held it tightly. He stretched out his right hand and clenched it into a fist. He punched Demo Hun's shocked face. Boom! Demo Hun smashed into the ground like a comet. The left side of his face caved in. He was utterly enraged. Li Qingshan did not follow up with another attack. Instead, he spread his arms and pursed his lips firmly. His muscles bulged, and the ground shook violently. Several hundred boulders flew into the air. As he clenched his fists, they rapidly compressed and condensed into fist-sized pebbles that revolved around him. Under Demo Hun's shocked gaze, the entire Azura realm shook violently. With Li Qingshan at the center, wild winds whistled and flames blazed. Water surged into the sky, intertwining around him. They were earth, fire, wind, and water, the 4 origin substances of the world. At that moment, he seemed to dominate this world. Demo Hun, your time of death has come, Li Qingshan declared. His voice contained the moos of the ox demon, the roar of the tiger demon, the cry of the phoenix, and the silence of the spirit tortoise at the same time. The entire Azura realm echoed. You've only won one move. Do you really think you can win this battle? Demo Hun turned into a streak of light and rushed into the air. Li Qingshan raised his right arm, and a mountain rose from the ground. With a rumble, the streak of light pierced through the mountain. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath and blew hard. Within the deafening roar of a tiger, Wild winds whistled, and the streak of light gradually slowed down. The mountain behind him was blown away by the wild winds, turning into dust. The streak of light paused, and Dimo Hun's figure appeared again. He was blown away with an expression of disbelief. Li Qingshan flew up and pushed forward with his left hand. 5 sparks surged out from his fingers, turning into huge fireballs. They arced through the air and fell towards Dimo Hun like meteors. Dimo Hun galloped madly on his horse, but the meteors chased after him relentlessly. Even he dared not take the scorching heat head-on. He made a few sharp turns, and the 5 fireballs exploded one after another behind him, creating lakes of lava. Impossible! How can his strength increase to such a level in an instant? Dimo Hun cried out inside. An invisible force pressed down heavily on him, and the ground within a radius of 5 kilometers suddenly sank by several meters. In that instant, firelight illuminated his face, and a sphere formed from earth, fire, wind, and water descended from the sky. He used the Forsaken Immortal Sword in a hurry, and his figure blurred, appearing 300 meters away. Boom! The sphere struck the ground, and a wave of earth surged out in all directions, covering a radius of 50 kilometers. Just now, it had calmed down and turned into a ring of mountains. The ground had completely changed. Chapter 1132. The War Devil let out a hysterical roar. Li Qingshan's expression was indifferent. His eyes were filled with the light of divinity and devil. It was as if he had become one with the heaven and earth, bringing with him a lofty aura of the heaven and earth. "There's something strange about this Li Qingshan," said the Black Warhorse. "I'm afraid it has something to do with this realm. Let's kill our way out. Do you want to swallow the bitter fruit of failure? Do you want to be mocked by the other demon folk? Do you want more power? I just need some sacrifices." The Forsaken Immortal Sword Soul's voice echoed in Battle Devil Hun's mind. "I must win," said Battle Devil Hun while gnashing his teeth. Suddenly, he swung his sword backward. Blood splashed everywhere, and a huge horse head flew into the air. It looked at Battle Devil Hun in shock and anger. "You! In today's battle, there is only victory and no defeat. If you can't win, then only death awaits you." The war demon raised his celestial abandonment sword high up in the air. The twisted sword light swallowed the warhorse impatiently. The horse's head melted in the sword light before it even hit the ground, dyeing the blade with a layer of blood. A new power surged out of his body, and his demonic chi became stronger and stronger. It was able to fight against Li Qingshan in the sky as an equal. Li Qingshan watched indifferently, until Dimo's demonic energy swelled to its peak. Only then did he say, "Are you ready? Die." The ground beneath Battle Devil Hun's feet split apart and soared into the sky. Li Qingshan descended from the sky, riding on the sphere formed by earth, fire, wind, and water. Boom! Heaven and earth trembled. 2 silhouettes froze in the sky. There were no divine arts or swordsmanship. There was only the violent collision of primitive forces. The wildly dancing sword wheel and the rings of earth, fire, wind, and water clashed thousands of times in an instant. The airflow in the halo rippled. It caused the entire Azura field to tremble. The blood-colored vortex in the sky spun rapidly. Suddenly, a small figure appeared from the depths of the vortex. He was wearing a red tutu and had his hair tied up in a bun. He was holding a slingshot in his hand. He looked like a little boy. Li Qingshan glanced around from the corner of his eye and thought, "Has an Azura king finally appeared? And he seems to be quite strong." Although he looked a little special, in the world of cultivation, appearances meant nothing. War Devil, on the other hand, was extremely fearful. After all, this was Li Qingshan's Azura field. If the Azura king joined the battle, if they came to help Li Qingshan, the situation would become very unfavorable. Sigh, there's no end to the fighting and killing. But this place isn't as weak as I thought. The little boy opened his lifeless, dead fish eyes. He didn't have the usual Azura's enthusiasm for fighting and killing. On the contrary, his interest waned. Not to mention participating in the battle. He didn't even have the interest to watch the battle. He sighed and looked away, making people wonder if he really belonged to the Azura tribe. He pressed his hands against the blood-colored vortex and struggled to free his legs. He descended from the sky, and the aftermath of the fierce battle swept through the azure field. When it reached his side, it separated into two, unable to touch him at all. Yinqing hid in the void to avoid the aftershocks of the battle. When she saw the dark sun and moon pattern on the boy's doo-doo, she immediately revealed a look of shock. There's also an azure sacrificial altar here. The little boy first landed on the azure sacrificial altar, then flashed to the side of the last flower frenzy saber. He stood on his tiptoes and grabbed the saber handle to pull it out. I think it's called last flower frenzy. Then he flashed back to the azure sacrificial altar. This time, the speed he displayed was not any slower than Li Qingshan and War Devil. In fact, he was even more relaxed. He was like a dead fish, lying on the azure sacrificial altar. His eyes were lifeless as he looked at the blood-colored vortex in the sky. He waved the last flower frenzy saber in his hand a few times, looking extremely bored. Once again, people began to doubt his race. Let go of me. The frenzy saber soul roared, and the saber blade trembled. However, after a bitter battle, it was unable to resist the grip of that small hand. Sigh, I'm hated again. He casually threw the last flower frenzy saber to the side and hugged the slingshot. Little girl, you're still the best. What the hell is this thing? Not good. Li Qingshan's indifferent eyes revealed a look of surprise. He found that the earth, fire, wind, and water around him had a trace of disharmony. His current posture not only came from his own strength, but also from his absolute control over the entire azure field. In order to maintain this posture, he didn't even dare to use his supernatural powers. However, the appearance of this little boy caused a huge flaw in his control, even though he didn't do anything. How could War Devil let go of such a good opportunity? The edge of his sword cut through the rings of wind, water, and fire, chopping towards Li Qingshan with irresistible force. Li Qingshan waved his arms, and the surrounding stones stopped in front of him. He suddenly pushed with both hands, and the stones shattered into pieces, turning into a sandstorm. War Devil turned into a curved sword light, dodging at high speed, but he was still sucked into the sandstorm. Explosions resounded, and the ground was filled with smoke and dust. It was full of holes. When the smoke and dust dispersed, War Devil's body was badly mutilated. He grinned and said, Li Qingshan, it's over. You can't win against me. You'll never win against me. After saying this, he raised the abandoned immortal sword high up and chopped at the void in front of him, trying to escape from the azure field. No, kill him first. War Devil's expression changed and he stopped. You idiot, I'll naturally kill him later. Right now, I need more sacrifices. Kill him. War Devil clenched his teeth, and his expression kept changing. He was arguing loudly with himself, as if he was suffering from schizophrenia. There was a huge difference between man and sword. It wasn't that War Devil was stupid, and he didn't understand the principle of being weak first, and then strong later. Just now, in the intense battle, he could feel the will of the abandoned immortal sword's soul seeping into him, trying to enslave him. Just now, it had chosen to escape without his consent. This situation was very dangerous, and it was even worse than fighting with Li Qingshan. If the abandoned immortal sword obtained a large number of sacrifices, it would completely gain the upper hand. Only by fighting with Li Qingshan and continuously exhausting the abandoned immortal sword's power could he maintain the balance and avoid becoming a sword slave. External power really isn't that easy to borrow. Power that I can't control will only enslave me. Li Qingshan thought, but he didn't take the opportunity to attack. Instead he shouted, Hey kid, go home! Only by chasing away this strange azure child could he be confident that he could suppress War Devil in the azure field. Otherwise, even if he won, it would be meaningless. What does it matter to you? The little boy turned around and lay down on the azure sacrificial altar. This is my territory. If you don't want to go home, then come help me. Otherwise, if this place is destroyed, you won't be able to stay, Li Qingshan said. You're an azure? The little boy asked weakly. I will be in the future. Li Qingshan let out a murderous aura. I hate azures. The little boy picked his nose. Aren't you an azure too? Li Qingshan asked. I hate myself too. The little boy changed his finger and continued to pick his nose. Fine, I'm actually a human. I hate humans more. The little boy put the nostril he had just picked up into his mouth and tasted it. Bah, bah, it's like booger. Ah, I don't have booger. Chapter 1133. A strand of sword chi rushed into the air. Li Qingshan suddenly looked back, and the streak of light shot through the air, twisting and turning as it shot over. Battle Devil Hun and Celestial Abandoned Sword had reached a temporary agreement. They would kill Li Qingshan first. Li Qingshan frowned. He flapped his phoenix wings and took off into the air, flying towards the horizon and rushing towards the center of the blood-red swirl. He thought, the only thing I can do right now is send him into the Azura realm. Even if the chances aren't great, I can only try. Layers of bloody clouds passed by him. The blood-colored whirlpool was like a funnel hanging upside down in the sky. It was much deeper than it looked. The higher Li Qingshan flew, the narrower the surroundings became. The aura of the Azura realm became stronger, making people's killing intent boil in their hearts. As expected, Battle Devil Hun followed closely behind, constantly closing the distance between them. The whirlpool became narrower and narrower. There was not much room to move up. Li Qingshan turned to face Battle Devil Hun, preparing to use his innate divine ability. In the blood-colored whirlpool above his head, a single eye suddenly appeared. It was 10 miles in radius. The bright red color was like a bloody lake, and the pupil was even redder. Li Qingshan's heart trembled. What was this? Battle Devil Hun also paused and looked towards the sky. If this was not a monster with only one eye, then the figure of the owner of the eye could be imagined. That must be an unimaginably powerful existence in the Azura realm. Even with the invisible barrier of the domain, the gaze cast by the blood-red eyes seemed to have substance, filled with a frenzied murderous hostility, and seemed to be searching for something. How annoying! The little boy lay on the ground again and murmured. Under the gaze of the blood-colored eye, Li Qingshan felt the blood in his body boil. In an instant, the sense of threat it brought him was far greater than Battle Devil Hun's. He punched out almost instinctively. Black shockwaves roared and turned into interweaving cracks that tore the passage between the Azura realm and the Azura realm. It blocked the line of sight of the bloody eye. He still felt a lingering fear. Die! Battle Devil Hun seized the opportunity. The sword light split and turned, filling up the blood-red vortex and swallowing Li Qingshan. Behind him was the shattered void, and there was nowhere for him to retreat. The only thing he could do was to block the sword light. Once he lost the upper hand, he would fall into an extremely dangerous situation. At this time, the little boy bounced up from the Shura sacrificial altar and took out a stone from his waist pocket. He tightened the slingshot in his hand and shot it into the sky. In an instant his entire aura changed. His decadence and melancholy were swept away, and a black light that could pierce through everything shot out from his eyes, causing the world to darken. That is indeed hidden in the void. Yin Qing's vision was also shrouded in darkness. The remaining words were also swallowed up by the darkness. The darkness also covered Li Qingshan and Dumo's astonished expressions. In the deep darkness, it was as if he had experienced an eternity. Or perhaps it only lasted for a moment. When the darkness vanished, Battle Devil Hun's sword-wielding arm suddenly snapped. The severed arm gripped the forsaken immortal sword firmly and continued flying towards Li Qingshan. But it had lost its original power. Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. The thing that had snapped Battle Devil Hun's arm was the stone the boy had shot out with the slingshot. It could be regarded as a sneak attack, but how could sneak attacks be so easy at their level of cultivation? Just now the darkness was extremely strange. It was like a black curtain that had fallen down. Although it lasted for an extremely short period of time, it enveloped and obscured everything, obscuring Battle Devil Hun's senses. This was definitely not something a regular Azura king could use. Just where did this kid come from? He obviously would not miss out on such a great opportunity. With a single thought, he had already burst through the layers of light. He powered the force field of the world and sucked the forsaken immortal sword into his hand. Gripping it firmly, he bellowed out, "Spirit Turtle suppresses the seas." Battle Devil Hun suddenly experienced unprecedented weakness. His severed arm grew back in the blink of an eye, returning to its original state. It was not a particularly severe injury. However, the stone did not just break his arm. His connection with the forsaken immortal sword had been severed too. He gazed down in surprise and fury. The boy had returned to his original appearance, collapsing on the Azura altar of armaments. He murmured to himself, "Who told me to hate demonfolk the most?" "Thanks." Li Qingshan laughed aloud and thanked him. The forsaken immortal sword in his hand erupted with thousands of streaks of light. He was reluctant to be suppressed, and felt like he could not hold on any longer. He sneered, and the muscles on his arm tightened, turning a faint green. He powered the power of tremors at full strength. The forsaken immortal sword trembled violently, producing a series of resonances. Enveloped by the black shockwaves, the dazzling streaks of light constantly shattered. "If you resist again, I'll destroy you," Li Qingshan said sternly. No matter how tough the material the forsaken immortal sword was forged from, it was impossible for it to contend against him now that it had lost its master, Sword Slave. The power of tremors was extremely destructive to solid objects. It was enough to completely shatter and destroy the forsaken immortal sword after it ran out of power. All right. I can fight for you. I'll acknowledge you as the master of the forsaken immortal sword. Stop." The soul of the forsaken immortal sword immediately gave in. As a sword, it was not afraid of failure. No matter who obtained it, they would need its power. It was reluctant to destroy it. However, just now it could clearly sense that Li Qingshan was serious. He was filled with brutal determination. No matter how violently it twisted and twisted, its will to live remained. The battle devil was indeed astonishing. He did not try to take back the forsaken immortal sword. Instead, he attacked the void in front of him with all his might, preparing to escape. After the forsaken immortal sword was taken away, his mind became much clearer. He understood that he had no chance of winning this battle. There was no way he could kill Li Qingshan in his current state. However, this was not entirely a bad thing. At the very least, he had freed himself from the forsaken immortal sword. He did not have to worry about becoming a sword slave again. "Wait until I return to the outside world and meet up with the army. Then I'll fight him to the death." You want to leave?" Li Qingshan flew down. The forsaken immortal sword soul said, "Refine me. You will obtain unprecedented power. Killing trash like this will be as easy as drinking water." "Shut up." Most of Li Qingshan's strength was used to suppress the forsaken immortal sword, to prevent it from suddenly turning against him and fleeing. The power of the Azura field alone was not enough to stop the War Devil Hun from fleeing. Right when the War Devil Hun was about to flee, a bone sword appeared outside the Azura field, stabbing towards the War Devil Hun. The Battle Devil's heart went cold. He felt a sense of danger. The sword was covered in a layer of faint golden light, and it was extremely terrifying. However, Li Qingshan had already arrived. He clenched his teeth and condensed his chi into a sword to deflect the bone sword. Scram! The war demon charged out of the Azura field and brushed past Shaoan. He felt a slight pain in his waist. He had been cut by the edge of a sword. Such a small wound was not even worth mentioning. Even if the Buddha's light prevented the wound from healing, it was nothing. He would not die even if he was cleaved in half. Under his surging demonic chi, the Buddhist light was washed away in the blink of an eye. The wound was exposed, and death suddenly began to spread. His body stiffened, and he was pulled back into the Azura field by an invisible force. Chapter 1134. The battle demon was just like everyone else who had been struck by the Buddha-slaying sword. He was in disbelief as he watched the pale white flames surge and spread. He felt as weak as a mortal. "You've lost," Li Qingshan said. "I've lost." In the final moment of life and death, the battle demon instead recovered his composure. The demon domain is determined to obtain the 9 provinces and the forsaken immortal sword. Very soon, you'll follow in my footsteps, Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan gazed at the forsaken immortal sword in his hand and smiled. The demon domain is indeed very troublesome, but it can't be more troublesome than Qiongqi. Demon god Qiongqi? The battle demon was stunned. He stared at Li Qingshan deeply, before being swallowed by the flames. A sliver of surprise flashed through the eyes of the boy, who lay on the Azura altar of armaments like a corpse. He thought, Cheongchi? That's indeed troublesome. But what does it have to do with me? Am I supposed to be less troublesome? Little and stowed a ball of flames into his sleeve. Li Qingshan asked, How's it going outside? It's all right. Let's go take a look. Then Li Qingshan told the boy, Oi, stay here for a while. I'll talk to you later. However, he understood extremely well that with the great power this strange Azura king had demonstrated just now, no one could stop it from leaving the Azura field. Not even him, the master of the Azura field. The boy lay there without moving at all. He said feebly, Don't talk to me. I hate you. Outside the Azura field, the king of Southern Yu and Chulai king worked together, slowly suppressing the surging demon chi. It was all thanks to little Anne's chaotic soul bell, and the golden cicada spirit king's cicada cry, that they managed to effectively disrupt the demon folk army. They managed to earn a lot of time. However, there were clearly powerful experts among the demon folk army as well. They rapidly approached Great Buddha Mountain. Strange. Why haven't the reinforcements from the Dragon Province arrived yet? Jean Fugue powered the surging black cloud sand. The Green Province was far away from the Dragon Province, but both the Hawk God Protector and the royal advisors of the left and right should have arrived a long time ago. Against the invasion of the demon domain, it would not be strange for the 3 directors and 9 ministers of the Dragon Province to set out together. Why was it that they had not shown up yet? There's no need to think about it. He won't come. The divine kingdom of the other folk has fallen because of demon folk. How can they follow in their footsteps? Gu Yining said. The invasion of the demonic domain concerns all living beings in the 9 states. Who can stay out of it? Yu Weiyang frowned heavily. Unless they had no other choice, the other folk did not want to oppose the demon folk either. What if the emperor of the great Xia dynasty has other plans? Gu Yining shrugged. There was a hint of playfulness in his voice. Another plan? Jean Fugue was slightly taken aback. Chulai King, and the others heard it as well. Gu Yining was born in the Dragon Province. Her identity was extraordinary, and the people she came into contact with were members of the imperial family and nobility. Her information was far more abundant than a 10,000-year-old dragon, like the Dragon King of the Sea. She even surpassed kings of a province like Chulai King and the king of Southern Yu. Her words could not help but raise many wild and fanciful speculations. The dauntless monk and the unraging monk exchanged glances. They had felt doubtful a long time ago as well. As the leader of the Buddhist sects in the world, the Lingua Temple ignored the appearance of the enemy of Buddha and the invasion of demon folk. It was extremely strange. Just what was brewing in the Dragon Province right now. However, they could not afford to consider that right now. Gu Yining's words were equivalent to cutting off all possibilities of reinforcements. If it were not for the fact that the great cultivators were all people with unwavering willpower, they probably would have scattered already. The current situation had not taken a turn for the better. The roars and battle cries in the demon cavern drew closer and closer. Once the demon domain army killed their way out, no one would have the strength to fight them anymore. Your Majesty, we've already done everything we can. Why don't we retreat to the Mist Province? A great cultivator secretly suggested to the king of Southern Yu. What's done is done. There's no need to say anything more. The king of Southern Yu said firmly. The great cultivator said nothing more, but he was clearly rather displeased. When he struck out, he held back even more. The king of Southern Yu understood the temperaments of his honored guests. They were probably all displeased with his decision. If they did not take any risks, they could still lend a hand. But once the demon folk charged out, they would immediately request for retreat. And it was impossible for him to use his own resources to forcefully clash with the demon folk. He thought, Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan, I've really done everything I can. At this moment, Li Qingshan stepped out of the Azura field with the forsaken immortal sword in hand. He looked around and said loudly, I've slain the demon of the war. Everyone riled up with vigor. Some of them even found it rather unbelievable. Just how terrifying was the combination of the demon of the war and the forsaken immortal sword. Yet Li Qingshan had actually slain and taken the sword away. Just how powerful was he right now? At this moment, the battle cries in the demon cavern were already inches away. The demon chi surged even more violently, struggling to suppress it. Li Qingshan passed the forsaken immortal sword to Little Anne. Be careful not to let it escape. The path of the sword it contains truly is extraordinary. It's definitely on par with the sword scripture of heaven and earth. You can take a shortcut and comprehend it. With that, he leapt into the demon cavern. Little Anne gripped the forsaken immortal sword, and immediately began refining it. As soon as the forsaken immortal sword left Li Qingshan's hand, it began to tremble violently before gradually fading away. It wanted to flee into space. Little Anne first stabbed the sword into the blood sea banner, then pulled it out. It was already coated in a thick layer of bloody light. He then activated the skull prayer beads, turning them into tiny skulls that bit tightly onto the blade of the sword. Finally, he hung the chaotic soul bell at the end of the sword hilt. The sword trembled and clanged. He did not forget to say, "If you dare resist, I'll have Qingshan destroy you when we get back." These methods and those words were indeed effective. The forsaken immortal sword gave up on struggling and turned to threaten him. "I'd advise you to obediently let go. Do you know what will happen to you if you want to become my sword master? Your mind will gradually become twisted, and your thoughts will become frenzied. In the end, you won't even be able to recognize yourself." Little Anne smiled. "If you say that, then you must have sensed it. Great beauty and white bone, life and death, withering and flourishing. In the eyes of the world, her heart of white bone had always been an extremely twisted and frenzied existence. Even though she had coincidentally obtained a sliver of humanity during her cultivation, that was definitely not her true nature. If a mere sword soul wanted to shake the great will and great vow of the path of white bone and great beauty, it would be a fool's dream. The forsaken immortal sword soul was momentarily speechless. It muttered viciously, "Just what are the origins of these two?" Li Qingshan's figure swelled in the wind, turning into a towering ox demon. He swung his fists down. Boom, 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 boom. The demon cavern was in shambles, covered in crisscrossing spatial cracks. However, this was only a temporary measure. The surging demon chi clearly did not fear the slashes of space, and the cracks would eventually recover. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath and leaned over the demon cavern. He murmured, "Spirit turtle transformation." Chapter 1135. Li Qingshan arched his back high into the air, turning into a five-colored turtle shell. His forelimbs hung down like four huge pillars that held up the sky. However, the color of his body was as gentle as jade, shining with divine light. He sank down slowly, and the demon chi surged and dispersed. The spirit turtle suppresses the seas, remaining completely still. Everyone was speechless for a moment. They were stunned by this power. Boom! The huge spirit turtle that Li Qingshan had transformed into suppressed the demon cavern, pushing the power of the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to the limit. He let out a deep roar, like a dragon's roar from the depths of the ocean. The demon folk army surged before the demon cavern, only to see a jade wall that glowed with divine light blocking their way. That idiot fighting Demon Hun. His entire army has been wiped out. The commander of the demon army was a short old woman. She was naked, but she was covered in red fur. Her withered face was filled with ruthlessness. She said to the demon kings behind her without even looking back, "Shatter him." In that moment, streaks of demonic light illuminated the entire demon cavern, shooting over. The red-haired old woman smiled viciously. The power of several dozen demon kings striking out together was so great that it could instantly destroy a mountain. Trying to block the demon cavern with their bodies was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. However, the jade wall suddenly flashed with a mirror-like luster, reflecting the demonic light back, which surged violently in the narrow demon cavern. The red-haired old woman's face changed, and she retreated backwards. Her retreat was not a big deal, so the demon kings retreated with her. Originally, it was not like they could not stop them with their strength, but none of them wanted to stand out. As a result, the demonic light whistled into the demon folk army. Countless demon folk were reduced to dust, suffering heavy casualties. Li Qingshan sniggered. Just like when he used the ox demon transformation, the spirit turtle's profound shell, and the profound light illuminates, all were his two great innate abilities. Their power had reached an unprecedented level, and he could use them freely like he was eating or drinking. The red-haired old woman flew into a rage. All of you get him. I'll definitely kill anyone who takes another step back. Seeing how her techniques were ineffective, the red fur all over her body surged, stabbing towards Li Qingshan like millions of needles. The demon kings rushed over too, attacking furiously. Li Qingshan felt an itch in his abdomen, followed by a violent vibration. If this went on, he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Raising his head that resembled both a dragon and a snake, he asked Chu Lai King, "What are you waiting for, my friend?" "All right." Chu Lai King waved his sleeves and pointed downwards. The Qingzhou cauldron fell heavily, and with a loud bang, it pressed down on the turtle's back. Li Qingshan carried the mountain-like Qingzhou cauldron on his back. Not only did he not feel uncomfortable, but he also felt that he was with the entire Qingzhou, forming a perfect whole. The mountains and rivers of the Qingzhou flashed past his peaceful eyes. Every mountain was his body, and every river was his blood. The itchiness and pain in his abdomen instantly lessened. Chu Lai King was also surprised. He had actually understood the Qingzhou cauldron in an instant and borrowed its power. The red-haired old woman gave up on attacking. Her face was gloomy. The realm above the devil's den was sealed again, although it did not have the demon-suppressing power of the demon-suppressing hall. However, it was far sturdier than the demon suppression hall. With their strength alone, it was impossible for them to break through it in a short period of time. The surging demon chi dispersed, revealing the starry sky again. Before they knew it, night had already fallen. Everyone could not help but look at the horizon. Never had they found the river of stars to be so resplendent. Looking further down, Great Buddha Mountain was no longer the same as before. In its place was the divine turtle with the huge cauldron on its back. He was the one who had ended the war. Qingshan, the unraging monk, arrived before the spirit turtle. He was filled with mixed feelings. With Li Qingshan's strength, he could leave if he wanted to. No one could stop him. Even if demon folk ruled the world and turned the 9 provinces into a demon domain, not a single demon king would be able to do anything to him. Moreover, he could be regarded as half a war demon, so perhaps he would be even more at home. "Don't worry, master. The demon cauldron has already been suppressed." Li Qingshan turned his huge head. His deep eyes seemed azure blue at first glance, but as he gazed into them, they grew darker and darker, becoming as dark as the deep sea. They shone with the glow of divinity, flowing with Buddhist wisdom and tranquility. The unraging monk's heart warmed up. Even within Buddhism, just how many people could take on such responsibilities and make such sacrifices? Who was bold enough to say that his disciple was not worthy of being a Buddhist disciple? The dauntless monk brought his palms together towards Li Qingshan. "Amitabha, I thank you in the place of all the living beings in the world. You might be a demon, but your actions are akin to the Buddhas, dragons, and elephants. You've rendered boundless virtue." Thank you for your praise, Abbot. I'd rather be an ox than a child." Li Qingshan suddenly understood Brother Ox's feelings a little. If he had to choose, he would rather carry a child on his back than become a beast for the Buddhas of the 9 heavens to ride on. The dauntless monk frowned, but there was a sigh of "just as I thought." "Exactly." The golden cicada spirit king smiled. Gu Yinying seemed to be in thought. She approached him and asked with a smile, "Is it heavy?" "Of course. Why don't you try carrying it on my back?" Li Qingshan said in exasperation. Actually, it was not heavy. Most importantly, he could not move at all. It was extremely suffocating. At a time like this, the water mirror's image demonstrated its usefulness. "I can't carry him." Gu Yinying laid out her hands. "Is it worth it to do this? I just want to do it. It doesn't matter whether it's worth it or not." With a thought, a mirror clone emerged from Li Qingshan's left eye and yawned. Soon afterwards, a mirror clone emerged from his right eye as well, turning its head forcefully. Under the spirit turtle transformation, all of the spirit turtle's innate abilities strengthened, ensuring sufficient mobility. "Looks like you've already found a way to deal with it," Gu Yinying said. "Of course. I can't stay here all the time. I still have to go to the Ink Sea. Li Qingshan smiled. Li Qingshan, I'll be waiting for you in the Ink Sea. Don't make me wait too long. The Dragon King of the Sea left with a flick of his sleeve, turning into a swimming dragon and disappearing into the horizon. We fought side by side after all. Can't we turn enemies into friends? Gu Yinying sighed. Women shouldn't stick their noses into men's matters. Li Qingshan said. Don't even think about it. Gu Yinying widened her eyes before breaking into a self-deprecating laugh. She extended her hand and patted Li Qingshan's head. I'm going. You can stay here. Crunch. Li Qingshan bit down, and Gu Yinying had already taken off with the wind. Her words drifted down from the horizon. Hurry up and get out of here. You still owe me something. I'll need your help very soon. Got it. Li Qingshan raised his head and looked at Chu Lai King and the King of Southern Yu. Can your majesties come over for a chat? I was just about to bid farewell. Qingshan, is there anything else you need help with? The King of Southern Yu said very amiably, which made Chu Lai King frown heavily. Little, and has already told me about your help. I'll definitely repay you handsomely in the future, Li Qingshan said. You're too kind, Qingshan. The King of Southern Yu smiled. He had been waiting for that. Everything he had done in the Green Province could be said to be for the sake of Li Qingshan. With Li Qingshan's vengeful nature, he immediately felt like everything was worth it. Your Majesty, King of Chu, there's something I'd like to discuss with you, Li Qingshan said. What is it? Chu Lai King said. Chapter 1136. Good idea. If we want to suppress demon caverns long-term, Tree Kings are the best choice. The various demon caverns of the Mist Province are all being suppressed by a great banyan tree right now. The King of Southern Yu clapped his hands. He was eager for the Banyan Tree King to take over the Green Province and become the god of the province. Kid, you haven't disappointed me after all. A streak of golden light shot over. Madame Tung had been forced into retreat by Little Anne, so she was obviously reluctant to accept this. Coupled with the fact that the battle had truly been chilling, she had been hiding in the shadows the entire time, waiting for an opportunity. Chu Lai King said nothing in thought. He looked around. Everyone looked at him, waiting for his decision. However, apart from the Dauntless Monk and the Unraging Monk, both the Golden Cicada Spirit King and the King of Southern Yu would probably stand on Li Qingshan's side. As for his daughter, it went without saying. She basically seemed to be bewitched by Li Qingshan. He could not help but sneer. If I don't agree, you'll be forcing me to abdicate. Li Qingshan chuckled, but he did not deny it. He still had many things he needed to do. He definitely could not remain here for long. The gate of hungry ghosts in the myriad ghosts abyss has opened. If we ignore it, the Green Province will become a land of death very soon, said Little Anne. This point was also verified by the huge cavity to the south of the Green Province cauldron. Your Majesty, it looks like that's all we can do. The Dauntless Monk considered it for a while before also going up to persuade him. He did not want Great Buddha Mountain to end up in the hands of demons, but it was better than being taken over by demon folk. The 9 cauldrons are a symbol of vassals of Great Xia, so what's there to be reluctant about? And when the Green Province faced a disaster, has Great Xia ever sent a single soldier? Instead, it's me, your old enemy, who has come to help you. The King of Southern Yu stood with his hands behind his back and said slowly. Chu Lai King looked at the King of Southern Yu with a frown. The King of Southern Yu stared back without backing down. They were natural enemies. However, this grievance had been passed down from their ancestors. There were no specific grievances between them. Chu Lai King could not help but think about what Little Anne had said about the snail's horn. Perhaps it was time to put an end to this. He let out a long sigh and finally nodded. All right. After a moment of determination, he completely cut off the connection with the Qingzhou cauldron, turned around and left. Your Majesty. The Dark Queen stepped forward. She bowed gracefully, showing more respect to this frustrated man than usual. Chu Lai King's stern expression softened a little. He looked back again. Little Anne was also watching him leave. He sighed in his heart. No matter what, the Ji clan had finally produced a cultivator with a boundless future. As for how far she could go, it would depend on her fortune. However, how could he be willing to fall behind his daughter? He took a deep breath and compared himself to the 10,000 worlds in the heavens. The 15,000 kilometers of the Green Province was truly nothing more than a snail's corner. As a result, he let go and said to the Dark Queen, "Come on a stroll across the sea with me." "I understand," the Dark Queen said gently. A streak of silver light rushed into the air. The king of Southern Yu rode the Silver Dragon King back to the Mist Province with his honored guests. "Qingshan, I'll go meet up with the monks first." "I'll be troubling you here," said the unraging monk. "Go if you want to. Cut the nonsense," Li Qingshan said bluntly. After Chu Lai King completely severed his connection with the Qingzhou cauldron, he immediately felt much more at ease. He had benefited quite a lot from comprehending the laws of the world it contained. "Damn disciple," the unraging monk bellowed before smiling to himself. "It still sounds better like that." However, when he turned around, he saw the dauntless monk talking to the Golden Cicada Spirit King. He was extremely polite, which surprised him slightly. According to the seniority of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, fellow Golden Cicada can be regarded as our senior. The dauntless monk brought his palms together. "You're too polite, Abbot. How can someone who's been exiled be a senior?" The Golden Cicada Spirit King returned the gesture. "This is an old custom of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Looking at it now, there are some omissions. You've protected the Buddhist Dharma and purged the demons, so the Chan Monastery of Devanaga owes you greatly. I'm willing to take back the Order of Exile in the name of the Abbot. I wonder if you're willing to accept that?" Only then did Li Qingshan understand the dauntless monk's plans. Right now, the Chan Monastery of Devanaga was at its weakest. Not only had they lost their headquarters, but 2 of the 4 monk kings had died as well, and their other losses were innumerable. In these chaotic times, this was definitely not a good omen. If he could invite the Golden Cicada Spirit King back to the monastery, then his strength would instead increase by quite a lot. In terms of battle prowess alone, the 4 monk kings probably would not be the Golden Cicada Spirit King's opponent, even if they worked together. He could not help but lament over the fact that all of these leaders were pragmatic. If this had happened to other demon kings, they probably would not have accepted it. But the Golden Cicada Spirit King's feelings for the monastery were extraordinary, so he did not treat his exile as some sort of injustice or humiliation. He brought his palms together. "Then thank you for your magnanimity, Abbot." The man and demon hit it off immediately, meeting up with the monks and discussing the matter of rebuilding the monastery. Jin Fugui and Yu Wuyang bade farewell to them too. Madame Tung was still reluctant to meet the Banyan Tree King, so she had vanished a long time ago. In the blink of an eye, Great Buddha Mountain fell from the sky. Only the sound of wind could be heard. Little and hugged her knees as she sat on Li Qingshan's head, gazing at the crescent moon. Li Qingshan smiled and closed his eyes, submerging his mind into the Green Province cauldron. Time passed in a hurry. In Towering City, an ancient and soothing laughter suddenly rang out. The sea of trees surged. On the northern edge of the sea of trees, a great banyan tree sped up, growing until it reached half the size of the Banyan Tree King. It lit up with brilliant light and gradually shrank, turning into a humanoid shape and making its way north. Li Qingshan opened his eyes and smiled. "We're finally here." With that, the Banyan Tree King arrived before Li Qingshan. He studied the spirit turtle with the huge cauldron on its back and praised with a smile. "You set off as soon as you heard the good news." "As soon as you heard the good news, you immediately set off." "Qingshan, your strength has increased by another level." "Same here. Let's take this Green Province cauldron." "Alright, but we need to take it slow this time, just in case the demon folk take advantage of the situation." "Of course. I'll stay here for a while longer, all the way until you become a god of the Green Province." The Banyan Tree King leapt into the Green Province cauldron. A while later, the cauldron erupted with brilliant light, rushing into the sky. Lush, green leaves surged out like a spring. A great banyan tree rose into the sky, and aerial roots extended and drooped down, wrapping around the Green Province cauldron and covering it. In the battle against the demon domain, The Green Province cauldron had been struck multiple times. Many fine cracks that were difficult to make out with the naked eye appeared on its surface, which made it convenient for the banyan tree king to extend his roots thinner than hair into it. Then, he used his countless branches to comprehend the laws of the world within. "I've already comprehended a part of it. You can use it as a reference," said Li Qingshan. Under the spirit turtle transformation, his ability to comprehend and calculate became even more startling. So he passed this information to the banyan tree king. You've actually comprehended it to such a level already. You sure are talented. You can save me quite a lot of time." The banyan tree king sighed in amazement. With the experience of digesting the Mist Province cauldron, his strength was incomparable to before. It was much easier this time, splitting the cauldron in an orderly manner. At the same time, the Dragon Province cauldron shook violently in the imperial court on Dragon's Head Mountain. A middle-aged man in bright yellow dragon robes and a crown on his head stroked the cauldron as he muttered to himself. Chapter 1137. In the desolate village, a shrouding aura of death enveloped the land. The land had become barren, even more deathly silent than a swarm of locusts. Not a single living creature existed. Even if there were one or two living creatures from time to time, they had already become subjects of the kingdom of death. Li Qingshan set foot in this land of death, and could not help but frown. This was the instinctive disgust that living creatures had towards death. The sound of hooves rang out from behind him, and a corpse horse charged over. Most of its body had rotted away, revealing its white bones. Its eye sockets shone with clear green light, filled with a desire to devour and hatred towards the living. Li Qingshan glanced back. He had sensed the corpse horse's existence a long time ago, but he never thought it would actually charge over. Has even the most basic sense of fear disappeared? There was a disturbance in the desolate village. Villagers emerged from the streets one by one. Their bodies were all half-rotted, and their movements were slow and rigid. When they saw Li Qingshan, they were like people who had starved for 3 days seeing a piece of meat. They all surged over. There were many agile and graceful existences, but they were all vengeful spirits and hungry ghosts. There was a phoenix's cry. Li Qingshan unfurled his wings and turned into a streak of fire, rushing towards the 10,000 ghosts abyss. The desolate village behind him was reduced to ashes in the flames. The ground flew backwards. Many cities and villages were swallowed by the aura of death as well, spreading for thousands of kilometers. Because they were close to a large sect like the Umbral sect, and the disciples of the Umbral sect were rather skilled in human tactics, even the soaring locust king feared them, so they were not particularly affected by the locust plague. Instead, many people gathered here. They never thought they would run into a disaster like this after escaping the locust plague, turning them all into ghouls. A large city appeared on the horizon. It was no smaller than the prefectural city of Clear River. It must have been a prefectural city as well. Prosperity had already become an old dream. It had completely become a land of ghouls, numbering in the millions. Even the horror movies he had seen in his past life paled in comparison to this. Li Qingshan thought back to how the White Lotus Mother had slaughtered 200,000 people in a city for the sake of refining an arcane treasure, and he had been extremely shocked. Only now did he understand what it meant for human lives to be worthless. He could not help but sigh. It was a coldness that treated all living things as straw dogs. Flying above the city, he suddenly descended from the sky, using gravity to accelerate. He was like a meteor, dragging a long tail of flames behind him as he landed in the center of the city with a loud bang. A wave of earth swept through the entire city. The buildings collapsed one after another, burying countless ghouls. It was like a great earthquake, or rather a great earthquake. As far as the eye could see, there were many tall buildings in the city. It had already turned into a pile of rubble. Looking at his own hands, he said, "This is my current strength, the power of destruction, and this is just a mirror image. What am I going to do with this power? Save the world and uphold justice? Or indulging in sensual pleasures? Do whatever I want." He flew away and continued forward. His words were left behind on the ruins of the city, and they drifted with the wind. "I'm sorry. Although I sympathize with your misfortune, I'm not fighting for you. When they were 300 miles away from the 10,000 ghosts abyss, Li Qingshan muttered, "Mystic light illuminates all." His field of vision suddenly zoomed in, and the 10,000 ghosts abyss was clearly reflected on the spirit turtle's profound shell. He could not help but be surprised. That's a tower of white bone over 3,000 meters tall rose into the air, but it only seemed like the base. Its height after completion was unimaginable. Was it going to connect with the sky? Many figures busied about on the Tower of Bone, like construction workers toiling away in the city. However, when Li Qingshan unleashed the mystic light illuminates all, these construction workers all sensed something, turning around and looking over. The ones who built the towers were actually corpse kings, and the supervisor was a group of ghosts that kept changing forms. A translucent tentacle whipped the back of a corpse king. It looked light and almost gentle, but it caused the corpse king's entire body to tremble, and a whip mark appeared on its skin that could not be damaged by magic treasures. Keep going. Don't stop. If you don't finish in time, not only will the world not be able to tolerate you, but the hungry ghost realm will not tolerate you either. The ghost glanced past Li Qingshan through the spirit turtle's profound shell with a cold gaze, which made him feel like a snake had slithered past his back. He could not help but frown. No matter what the hungry ghost realm wanted to do, they were determined to obtain little Anne. If he left him alone, he would definitely become a great problem in the future. However, this was different from the war against the army of the demon domain. The ghouls had already established themselves, and had even cast down a formation. The incomplete Tower of Bone was not complete, but it had clearly begun to take effect, which made him feel extremely threatened. The gate of hungry ghosts below had been ripped to a size even larger than the original 10,000 ghosts abyss. It was like the hungry ghost realm had opened its mouth and was about to swallow them. The mountainous green province cauldron was swallowed by the green, replaced by a towering tree. The dragon-like roots wrapped around the spirit turtle's body. Li Qingshan did not move at all. The sun, moon, and stars changed. Time passed by bit. The green province cauldron produced a soft sound. The roots that had penetrated deep into it grew vigorously, slowly widening the cracks and breaking them apart bit by bit. Torrential rain fell from the sky, washing away the ground contaminated by demon qi. The remaining great Buddha mountain stood in the gray rain. The rain gathered into a river and flowed down, wrapping around the great banyan tree. Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes. His body gradually changed, releasing a vibrating force. The Qingzhou cauldron emits buzzing noises, which sound like that of a great bell. Clang! The green province cauldron shattered into millions of rainbow-colored dust particles, sweeping away the torrential rain and the thick, dark clouds. For a moment, sunlight shone down, piercing through the gaps in the canopy. It shone resplendently. The great banyan tree swayed its branches, and the scattered rainbow-colored dust gathered on every single leaf. It was like a rainbow divine tree, growing at a faster rate once again. In a flash, Li Qingshan flew out from under the tree. He turned around and saw that the demon qi had just gushed out of the devil's den. The roots quickly spread and sealed the devil's den, digging deep into the ground. The tree grew taller and taller, looking like it could reach the sky. At the same time, countless great banyan trees rose from the ground in various parts of Qingzhou, causing countless living beings to look up in shock. The banyan tree king's aura became more vast and distant, surpassing that of ordinary so-called demons. It was like he was the representative of heaven and earth. And this was only the beginning. After refining the 9 cauldrons, he would truly become the god of the 9 provinces, the representative of the world's will. Li Qingshan asked with a smile, "How does it feel to become the god of Qingzhou?" "Not bad, or rather very good," said the banyan tree king. "Can you borrow the power of heaven and earth to suppress the gate of hungry ghosts?" asked Li Qingshan. "No, my power can't enter it either. The white bone pagoda you mentioned seems to be completely shielded from the laws of heaven and earth. Unless it can be destroyed, it's absolutely impossible to suppress it." The banyan tree king also expressed his helplessness. "If you really want to suppress it, you'd better hurry. When the gate of hungry ghosts is torn even bigger, It'll be too late. Chapter 1138. That child. You're talking about the Azura King. Li Qingshan was taken aback before returning to his senses. There was actually such a strange fellow in his Azura field. It was not that his memory was terrible, but that the child was startlingly obedient. He had been trapped in the tiny Azura field for so many days, yet he had not made any noise at all. He's no regular Azura King. If I'm not wrong, he should be a Rahu. Yinqing said sternly. What's a Rahu? Li Qingshan was surprised. Don't tell me he's a Rahu Azura. The Banyan Tree King was surprised. Ever since he became a god, he had rarely experienced such obvious emotional fluctuations. Rahu is the name of the original Azura, as well as the first Azura of the Azura realm, as well as the god king of the Azura realm. Legend has it that he was slain by a god because of the water of undying. Ever since then, the Azura realm has fallen apart, descending into eternal war. Banyan Tree King sure is knowledgeable. However, the Rahu God King already possesses an undying body, so he was not slain. That's where the undying body of Azura comes from. Only after Yinqing's introduction did Li Qingshan understand the significance of Rahu. In the Azura realm, they were equivalent to the princes of Great Xia, and unlike the imperial family of Great Xia, the more powerful they were, the more difficult it was for them to reproduce. As a result, there were extremely few Rahu. There were still very few princes who could achieve anything in Great Xia, as they were still humans at the end of the day, while Rahu was a true god, a natural god. The difference between the two was even greater than the difference between the son of village, Headley of Crouching Ox Village, and the prince of Great Xia. Yinqing said, the black sun and moon are Rahu's insignia. They symbolize the divine force that devours the sun and moon. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Li Qingshan asked. He thought about how devouring the sun and moon was probably not just a description. He had never thought his Azura field would actually summon such an important figure. No wonder he possessed such power. He had seen an Azura King before, but he was definitely not as powerful as this. I wasn't certain in the beginning either. After all, as a Rahu, he's just too weak. Too weak. Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. He had crippled Demo Hun, who was wielding the Forsaken Celestial Sword, with a single move. This was still too weak. A god's descendant was really shameless. However, when he thought about his own 9 transformations of the demons and gods, he felt that it was not a problem. He didn't have the right to criticize others. It had been less than 100 years since he started his cultivation, and he was not far from being invincible in the world. He had also angered all the cultivators in the world. He guessed, maybe he's just too young. He's still a little kid. That's not the case. Your Majesty will know once you see it. All right, let's go meet this divine son. Li Qingshan and Little and followed Yinqing to the Azura arena. He couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. The child was still lying on the Azura armament sacrificial altar, looking half dead. He wasn't cultivating, because his aura didn't grow stronger. Instead, it seemed to have grown weaker, and his appearance seemed to have grown a bit older. He immediately understood that the divine child was getting weaker day by day. He's lost his will to fight, Yinqing quietly reminded. I see. Li Qingshan nodded slightly and shouted, Hey brat, get up! The child was lying on his back, looking at the sky with his eyes listless. When he heard this, he turned around and faced his back to Li Qingshan. So useless, Li Qingshan then said to Yinqing. Can you become an Azura King if you kill him? Yinqing was shocked and took a step back. Your Majesty, don't speak nonsense. It wouldn't be a joke if this Rahu's will to fight was stimulated. Li Qingshan glanced at the child. The child didn't react at all. He smiled and said, How is it nonsense? If this goes on, this brat will become an Azura commander. He definitely won't be a match for you. Yinqing couldn't help but be slightly moved as she sized up the child's back. As an assassin, she paid particular attention to taking advantage of others when they were in a precarious situation. If she could obtain the Rahu clan's undying divine blood, then there would be boundless benefits. It's better if you don't let him try. Even if I become an ordinary Azura, I can crush this kind of trash with one finger, the child said weakly. But he was filled with indescribable confidence. Qing's heart trembled, and she immediately dispelled this thought. You finally can't help but speak. But in this world, you have to try to know. Don't be afraid, Qing. He's definitely bluffing, Li Qingshan said. Qing revealed a bitter expression. How could it be so easy to kill a god? The giant eyeball that appeared in the blood-colored vortex was probably for this divine blood. I'm already tired of fighting and killing. You better not force me. What if I force you? Li Qingshan crouched behind the child, his killing intent ready but not released. He was like a crouching tiger that bared its sharp fangs, ready to bite down at any time. This hypocritical killing intent really makes me want to vomit. Stop with your pointless probing, it's so annoying. Fine, you've seen through me. I'm just curious. Li Qingshan stood up. I, Li Qingshan, will definitely repay favors. You once lent me a hand, so as long as you stay in my territory, I will naturally protect you. No one will be able to harm a single hair on your head. The child tilted his head slightly and glanced out of the corner of his eye. Li Qingshan's expression was calm and firm, but with just the cultivation of 3 heavenly tribulations, he actually said that he would protect him. This was simply a huge joke. However, when it came from his mouth, it had a convincing power. Moreover, this fellow had clearly seen one of the countless eyes that were spying on him. You don't owe me anything. What's your name? Li Qingshan asked. The child withdrew his gaze and said nothing. You don't want to say? Fine. But for convenience's sake, I'll give you a name. Speaking of names, haha. Li Qingshan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he let out an arrogant laugh. Little and blinked, knowing that he was going to use his naming talent again. Li Qingshan paced back and forth on the Azura ritual platform, sometimes looking up at the sky, sometimes lowering his head in contemplation. He pinched his chin and pondered for a while. Suddenly his eyes lit up, and he pointed at the child. I've got it. The sun and the moon are bright, so I'll call you Little Ming. Little Ming. The child squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. His aura suddenly soared, and he slowly sat up. What do you think? Concise and comprehensive, simple but not simple. You can throw away your original name, right, Little N? Li Qingshan smiled confidently. Yes. Little N nodded seriously. Compared to Ji Xianyue, Little N was indeed more pleasant to the ears. Little N. As if confirming that Li Qingshan did not mean to insult him, Little Ming collapsed on the Azura ritual platform again, and hit his head against a rock. Fortunately, you met the current me. Little Ming, if I help you arouse your fighting spirit, can you help me fight a battle? Li Qingshan suddenly asked. If he could have the help of this Azura divine son, his chances of winning against the hungry ghost realm would definitely increase. Qingshan. Chapter 1139. No, Little Ming said resolutely. Then forget it. Li Qingshan did not force it. It was just a test anyway. He studied Little Ming curiously. Just how powerful was he before he lost his will to fight and weakened? At the very least, he could easily crush his current self. He looked up at the blood-red sky. The blood-red swirl that led to the Azura realm was still riddled with cracks. Unlike the demon's cavern in the demon realm, the connection between the Azura field and the Azura realm was not particularly close, so it recovered much more slowly. However, he believed that even if it recovered completely, the owner of the huge eye would not dare to enter so easily and endure the counterattack of the world of the 9 states. This was the greatest reason why he dared to provoke Little Ming, and even made a promise. It was also the greatest reason why he could face the demon realm and the hungry ghost realm. Being in this well-named 9 provinces was admittedly a kind of restraint, but it was also the greatest protection, allowing him to not have to face the powerhouses of the wider world. However, at this moment, after reaching the 5th layer of the Phoenix and balancing the transformation of the demonic and divine, he had already touched the edge of the well. He could leap out of the well with just one more step and enter an even vaster and more dangerous world. Whether it was Cheongqi, Emperor Li, or the divine child before him, they had only reflected a corner of it. There, the great advantage of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine would be weakened. His enemies would no longer be just cultivators. There would even be deities, Buddhas, and demons. When he thought of that, he could not help but tremble inside. It was not fear, but indescribable excitement and anticipation. But now, the path to the Azura realm had been severed. Who knew whether the owner of the huge eye would be guarding there? Ascension was the only way. As the ultimate goal of all cultivators in the world, the problem now was how to take the final step. And where would the final step lead to? The first problem had trapped countless cultivators in the world. Who knew how many geniuses had stopped here? Even the Golden Cicada Spirit King had been stuck at this step for many years. This was different from regular tribulations. Instead, it was to completely transcend this world. During the process of transforming into the spirit turtle to suppress the demon's cavern, Li Qingshan had already discussed this with the Banyan Tree King. The Banyan Tree King, who wanted to transform into a well, had given a relatively detailed explanation. The Banyan Tree King said, "You actually have the same mother. Are we long-lost brothers?" Under the shade of the tree, the spirit turtle opened its eyes and looked at the luxuriant tree with a rather strange gaze. "No, I'm talking about this world. She was the mother of all living beings in this world. Everything we have, whether it's the soul or the body, comes from it." Although on the surface, every living creature seemed to be an independent individual. But from the very first moment, he had already established a close connection with this world. In the process of cultivation, this connection will become even closer. We are all favored by the heavens. Oh, the so-called cultivation is like a baby absorbing nutrients from its mother through the umbilical cord. Li Qingshan seemed to have understood something. That's right. The more pampered a child is, the more they won't allow their child to leave them. And when would a child be willing to leave their mother? The Banyan Tree King's voice was filled with deep emotions, like a child longing for home. His vow to become a god of the 9 provinces was not just for ambition. I don't think so. At our level of cultivation, we've already condensed a tremendous amount of spiritual energy from this world. I'm afraid that the world's will is unwilling to lose this portion of power, so it'll pull and tie us down. It'd rather we die here and return everything to this world than let us leave. If the world is the mother, then all ascenders are unfilial children. Li Qingshan did not agree. His soul did not originate from this world, and he was someone who had even resolutely abandoned his home. Naturally, he could not understand the Banyan Tree King's feelings towards this world. That deep and unfathomable worlds, was probably something only the Banyan Tree King could touch. Of course, it's not wrong to understand it this way. However, the power of Mother is something that even deities have to stop. If it's really so selfish, how can there be ascenders? Moreover, there will definitely be a pulling force, but there will also be a repulsive force. Otherwise, with just our own strength, how can we break through the boundaries and ascend to another world? There's no harm in treating this as a test. A capable child will be able to bring the blessings of Mother to a faraway place. Li Qingshan pondered for a moment. I apologize. After all, this esteemed mother has never asked me for anything. There's no need to apologize. This is where your advantage lies. And it's also a very important step. Severing your attachment to this world. I believe that even fellow Taoist Golden Cicada, who wholeheartedly wants to ascend, has this attachment in his heart. This is also unavoidable. Li Qingshan nodded. Just like an ordinary person leaving their home for the first time, it was inevitable that they would have feelings of attachment. However, he had already left a world before. Although he was not the proud son of heaven of that world, he had once been captivated by it. As for you, you have no attachment to this world. You can be considered a natural-born unfilial son. Banyan Tree King laughed. This world can only be considered a stepmother. Although she treats me well, she can't compare to my birth mother. Li Qingshan laughed. The transmigration experience had already brought him very little benefit, so much so that he didn't even need to carefully conceal it. However, he didn't expect that there would be such benefits. Without the obstruction of the mind, all that's left is power. I believe that to you, this won't be a problem. And Li Qingshan was very confident. As long as he spent some effort and stabilized his current cultivation, he would basically be ready to ascend. However, your problem isn't the ascension itself, but the bet with Qiongqi, and how to ascend to the same world as Little An. Banyan Tree King's words exposed Li Qingshan's greatest worry. Once he ascended to a higher world, the 500-year promise with Qiongqi would definitely be accelerated, and he would very likely have to face it alone. What are the worlds you can ascend to? Apart from the 6 realms of Sasra, there's only the demon domain. There are no other possibilities. If it weren't for the repeated invasions of the demon domain, there would only be the 6 realms of Sasra. The 6 realms of Sasra traverse the various worlds omnipresent. Even if sentient beings don't ascend, their souls will return to it after death. Then what determines which world you ascend to? Don't ascend to the demon domain. That'll be bad luck. Race, cultivation method, and personality all affect you. It's hard to say whether it's a coincidence or not. You practice the demon war statuary, and your demonic nature is not weak. But you're fundamentally different from demon folk. You reject the laws of the demon domain very much, so you basically won't enter the demon domain. Chapter 1140. Where does the Tree King think I will ascend to? Little Anne's voice suddenly interrupted their conversation. I can't judge either. The cultivation technique you cultivate is very peculiar. It lies between life and death, Buddha and demon. You were originally a human, so the hell path, hungry ghost path, heavenly path, and human path might all be open to you. Because of that twisted vow, the demon domain might even accept you. However, the Azura path and the demonic beast path are the most impossible. The former is because of one's nature, while the latter is because of one's race. You have no fighting spirit, so you are not a member of the demonic beast clan. We have to ascend to the same world, no matter what Li Qingshan said. Even if it means reaching the hungry ghost realm? The Banyan Tree King asked. I won't hesitate, Li Qingshan said decisively. But we can always make a compromise and choose a world that we can both go to. I think the human path and the heavenly path are both good choices. However, it is the world that chooses you to ascend, not you who chooses the world. Moreover, it is best for you to accept the world's choice. Unlike the 9 prefectures world, that kind of high-level worlds will become very obvious. In a suitable world, no matter if it's cultivation or battle, it'll be like having the help of the heavens, and you'll get twice the results with half the effort. It can be said that those who follow will prosper, and those who go against will perish. Li Qingshan looked at Luo Ho Xiaoming in front of him. This was the most realistic example. An Azura who had lost his will to fight was probably as bad as the living in the hungry ghost realm. The Banyan Tree King's last words reverberated in her ears. It's better to forget each other than to help each other in times of hardship. You have already cultivated together to such a level. If you take one more step forward, it will be a vast world. Why do you insist on relying on each other? I'm going to the demonic beast path. This was Little Anne's answer. In the path of demonic beasts, groups of demonic beasts roamed freely. 10,000 beasts have no control. Legend has it that it is a world full of spirituality, although there is also the cruelty of natural selection and the law of the jungle. However, Li Qingshan believed that it was the most suitable world for him. The Azura path could only satisfy the tiger demon's desire to fight, while the heavenly Tao repelled the demonic nature. The human path might be able to allow his divinity and demonic nature to coexist, but he had already tasted the feeling of hiding in the crowd as a monster. It was definitely not as good as the freedom of being a pure monster. Li Qingshan didn't say anything else. He nodded at Little Anne and said, All right. Then let's go to the demonic beast road. The two of them smiled at each other and made their decision. Even though I don't have any clues for now, I don't care how the world chooses, and how free we are in the martial world. Of course, we have to go where we want to go together. The Banyan Tree King was also speechless. He did not know whether to be happy or to sigh. Come. Li Qingshan waved his hand. The blade gleamed brightly and landed in his hand. He swung it around and held it horizontally in front of him. The ending flower frenzied saber was covered with sword marks. You've worked hard in this battle. This is more like it. But I'll have to trouble you to place me on the Azura altar of armaments and sacrifice some scrap metal, the frenzied flower blade said proudly. Other than sacrificing weapons, the Azura altar of armaments also had the ability to repair and even strengthen weapons. Many weapons followed their masters and became famous in the Azura path step by step. No problem. Li Qingshan readily agreed. Unknowingly, the frenzied flower blade had already completely approved of him. What a good slave. A strange voice came from behind little Anne. It was the forsaken immortal sword spirit. What nonsense are you spouting? The frenzied flower blade was furious. It had a primitive hatred for swords. I don't want to talk to slaves, the forsaken immortal sword spirit said. My blade master won, and your sword master lost and died. You didn't abide by your duty, and that's why you ended up like this. That's not my sword master. Moreover, a weapon will never lose. It will always be held in the hands of the victor, just like now. Qingshan, I've already comprehended the way of the sword. I'll get you a better weapon. Little Anne pulled out the forsaken immortal sword and stabbed it into the Azura altar of armaments. Nonsense. My way of the sword is broad and profound. How could you comprehend it in such a short time? The forsaken immortal sword spirit shouted. You really don't need it? Li Qingshan asked. Most of the way of the sword can only be used with this sword. This sword is enough for me. Little Anne gripped the Buddha-slaying sword. The skull on the hilt revealed a sinister smile. The Buddha-slaying sword was her origin sword. Not only was it powerful, but it could also be tempered and improved. She didn't have to worry about being betrayed. Naturally, it was 100 times stronger than the forsaken immortal sword. The blade and the sword fell silent. No matter how strong and sharp a weapon was, it was still an external object. If it wasn't needed, it would be replaced and abandoned. No, I don't want to go to the Azura realm. The forsaken immortal sword spirit shouted. As the sword of the five absolutes immortal, its understanding of the Azura realm was no less than Li Qingshan's. If it went to the Azura realm's armory, it would definitely be reforged into an Azura divine weapon. This was a devastating blow to the forsaken immortal sword spirit, who wanted to become its master. What a joke! Are you afraid? The frenzied flower sword spirit mocked. Weren't you also abandoned? Do you think that stupid Li Qingshan would need 2 blades? I knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would be so soon. The frenzied flower sword spirit's voice was low, but it rose again. All right, kid, send me back to the armory. I'm sick of it. And so Li Qingshan stabbed the frenzied flower sword into the Azura altar of armaments. Hey little Ming, make way. Oh, Luo Ho Xiaoming flipped his body over and over again. Just like that, he rolled off the Azura altar of armaments. Li Qingshan shook his head. He really had no fighting spirit at all. With one hand on the hilt, he activated the Azura altar of armaments and said to the frenzied flower sword spirit, I don't have any scrap metal. I'll make do with this sword. You. The frenzied flower sword spirit was stunned. He felt that not only did Li Qingshan not use her as a sacrifice, but he was also preparing to repair her and strengthen her. I originally wanted to change my blade, but seeing that you've always been obedient, I'll see how you perform. Li Qingshan laughed aloud. Although he was rather eager to see just what kind of powerful weapon he would obtain after sacrificing the end wildflower blade and the forsaken immortal sword, he still chose to strengthen the end wildflower blade a step further. Tui obedient my ass, the frenzied flower sword spirit cursed happily. If you want to strengthen this blade, I advise you to do it step by step. Use some ordinary weapons to strengthen it. Otherwise it will break. Luo Ho Xiaoming's lazy voice came from below the Azura altar of armaments. Is that so? Li Qingshan scratched his head. This pattern was very familiar to him. Some ancient and terrifying memories surfaced, and he couldn't help but shiver. He hurriedly gripped the hilt of the blade tightly, as if the forsaken flower sword spirit would break if he was not careful. It's okay. Come on, I won't break. The frenzied flower sword spirit shouted. Only by surpassing the limits of strength could the essence be improved. Otherwise, it would only have a layer of light on it and become sharper. In battle, it would be quickly consumed. Let me think it over. Chapter 1141. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. From the cursive sword calligraphy to the abandoned immortal sword, the various things left behind by the 5 absolutes immortal had influenced his entire cultivation process. There were good and bad ones, and some had even threatened his life. However, this made him more and more curious about the 5 absolutes immortal. He was clearly a cultivator, but he was called an immortal. This in itself was very unusual. Forget about a cultivator who had gone through 3 heavenly tribulations. Even a cultivator who had gone through 4 or 5 heavenly tribulations would not be qualified to be called that. Furthermore, Brother Ox had praised him. Perhaps the legends were true, and he really was a banished immortal. Li Qingshan no longer cared about ordinary treasures, but the treasures left behind by the 5 absolutes immortal were not ordinary. The core treasure of the sword tomb was the abandoned immortal sword. Disregarding the sword soul's twisted personality, in terms of power alone, it was probably the best sword in the world. The core treasure of the painting tomb was definitely a painting scroll, and it was very likely that the Dragon King of the Sea was drawn on it. If he could plunder it before he ascended, it would not be a waste of his cultivation. I was that old guy's sword after all. When he sealed his 4th tomb, I watched with my own eyes. I didn't think that I would be sealed as well. Damn it! The abandoned immortal sword's soul was still angry at the mention of this, and it emitted waves of murderous intent. This can be considered as abandonment, so you changed your name to the abandoned immortal sword. I didn't expect you to have such deep feelings for the previous owner. Li Qingshan chuckled. Shut up. I want to tear that old guy to pieces. You're the one who should shut up. Little flicked his finger, and the blade vibrated. The abandoned immortal sword's soul snorted angrily. However, it did not dare to be rude again. The 5 absolutes immortal's secret tomb is floating in the void. The Dragon King of the Sea's main body is in the painting tomb, and he can't freely enter and exit it. So what if Li Qingshan rubbed his chin. Don't compare me to that pseudo-dragon. I've already fused with the sword catacomb. What's so hard about traveling through space? The forsaken immortal sword spirit said proudly. Li Qingshan couldn't help but look at Yin Qing. Yin Qing said, although I can hide in the void, my strength is still lacking. I can't freely travel through the void, and it's difficult for me to break through the sealed region. Li Qingshan nodded. It was no wonder that for so many years, the 5 extreme secret graves had always been a legend. If that was the case, then the forsaken immortal sword was the key to opening the 5 extreme secret graves. Alright, I'll trust you this once. You have to swear. Don't sacrifice me. The forsaken immortal sword said. That depends on your performance. If things went smoothly, of course I will repay you. Otherwise, who can be bound by an oath? Li Qingshan was not willing to make an oath with such a sword, even if it was just words. Hey, kid, you said you were going to strengthen me. Frenzied Blade Soul was unhappy. Why are you in such a hurry? Follow me into battle. Are you afraid that there won't be any good sacrifices? Let me repair your wounds first, just in case you run out of energy in the future. Li Qingshan patted the hilt of his blade and comforted the end of the frenzied blade. He considered where he could find some weapons to sacrifice. If it's just repair, these weapons should be enough. Little swung the Blood Sea banner, and with a series of clangs, countless demonic artifacts landed on the Azura altar of armaments, forming a small mountain. Although most of them were not of particularly high quality, the quantity was startling. They were the spoils of war she had obtained from powering the Blood Sea banner and devouring the demon folk army. That's enough. Little was always so timely. Li Qingshan immediately activated the Azura altar of armaments. A streak of red light rushed into the air, and all of the demonic artifacts melted away in the red light. Thick liquid surged out from the center of the Azura altar of armaments. It seemed like molten metal, but it also seemed like a form of energy. It gradually enveloped the end of the frenzied blade, gathering around the wounds and gaps, and beginning to repair them. Li Qingshan ordered Yin Qing to stand guard there, before leaving the Azura field with little Anne. Before he left, he glanced at Luo Ho Xiaoming again. He lay below the Azura altar of armaments, gazing at the sky without moving at all. He seemed extremely gloomy. A divine child of Azura suffering from depression? The world sure is vast. Nothing is too strange. The autumn wind rustled. A sword flew through the plains. The withered grass parted, leaving behind a long trail before suddenly rushing into the sky again. Li Xiaoyao rode his sword as the wind blew against his face. He was filled with delight. Just recently, he had undergone the heavenly tribulation in the Clear River Prefecture and become a Foundation establishment cultivator. The battle on Great Buddha Mountain had already come to an end. Various pieces of information had returned to the Clear River Prefecture. Although Li Qingshan had told him to stay away from the Sword Collection Palace, he could not help but go back and take a look. That was the starting point of his dream of becoming a swordsman. There were many loving seniors and juniors there. Now that the situation in the Green Province had stabilized, and the demon plague and locust plague had been suppressed and eliminated, he believed there would not be any danger. Although the Sword Collection Peak no longer hung high in the sky, the surrounding scenery gradually grew familiar. Heaven's Reliance Peak flickered on the horizon. The Sword Collection Palace was already very close. Flying over a mountain on his sword, two familiar figures stood at the top. Their purple and green robes drifted in the wind as they gazed at the Sword Collection Palace from afar. Senior Uncle Fu, Senior Uncle Yu. Li Xiaoyao recognized the two seniors who wielded the 10 renowned swords with a single glance. He leapt off the sword and sheathed it in a single stroke. Xiaoyao, you're fine. That's fantastic. Yu Zijian turned around. When Li Xiaoyao saw her smiling face filled with concern, he could not help but feel his heart warm up. However, he also discovered that her bright, beautiful face was tinged with some melancholy. While Senior Uncle Fu did not turn around the entire time, as if she was in a daze. Fu Qingjin's temperament was renowned in the Sword Collection Palace, but Li Xiaorao did not mind. And after practicing the sword scripture of heaven and earth, he found the world to be even more spacious. Small matters were not worth dwelling on. However, when he made his way over and followed Fu Qingjin's gaze, he could not help but widen his eyes in shock. Even if the Sword Collection Palace had been reduced to a mess, he would not have been so surprised. However, all he saw was that the damaged structures on the mountain peaks had all been repaired. Smoke curled into the air. In a daze, the Sword Collection Palace did not seem to have suffered any disasters at all. All it lacked was the flashes of light that crisscrossed through the mountains. However, the chanting drifted over from the mountain peaks. A great Buddha was carved on Heaven's Reliance Peak. People who came here for the first time would definitely think this was an ancient sapphire Buddhist temple. Senior Uncle W, what's going on? Li Xiaoyao was dumbfounded. This is the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. Fu Qingjin finally spoke, but his voice was filled with bitterness. It was the dauntless monk who had led everyone north and rebuilt the Chan Monastery of Devanaga here. On the top of Heaven's Reliance Peak, the dauntless monk suddenly stopped chanting and emerged from the main hall, gazing towards the south. What are you looking at, Abbot? A young novice monk sweeping the fallen leaves gathered his courage and asked. A few lone geese that have lost their flock. Where? The young novice monk looked around. You're still too young, so you can't see it yet. You'll see it once you grow up. Chapter 1142. The Sword Collection Palace is gone? Li Xiaorao murmured. He had a feeling that it was unreal. It seemed that the mountain was still echoing with the noise and laughter of his senior and junior brothers. When he came back to his senses, it was only the ripples of his memory. Unknowingly, his face was already covered with tears. Even if the palace master and the elders colluded with the demon region, many of their companions were innocent. Li Xiaoyao, are you still a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace? Yu Zijin suddenly asked. Yes, Li Xiaoyao answered instinctively. The Sword Collection Palace isn't dead. At the very least, there's still the three of us. Yu Zijin's eyes shone with glistening violet light. Behind her was the afterglow of the setting sun, interweaving into a colorful glow. But under her influence, it was like the rising sun, full of hope. Fu Qingjin and Li Xiaoyao were stunned. What was the point of saying this now? If the Sword Collection Palace had been destroyed by enemies, then so be it. They would naturally be motivated to take revenge and restore the Sword Collection Palace's reputation. However, the reality was that the Sword Collection Palace had colluded with the demon domain and dug their own graves. All of their disciples had died below the Sword Collection Peak. Even the Chan Monastery of Devanaga's actions of taking over the Sword Collection Peak could not be faulted. If they continued to call themselves disciples of the Sword Collection Palace, they would basically be asking to be humiliated. Zijian, everything has a beginning and end. When there's a rising sun, there's a setting sun. The Sword Collection Palace is no different. Why must you be so stubborn? Fu Qingjin sighed gently. All he wanted to do was leave his home and wander the world. Yeah, senior uncle. Why don't you return to the Clear River Prefecture and continue cultivating? You can still wield your sword and uphold justice. I was just saying it in passing. I think it's better if I don't become a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace. Li Xiaoyao also shook his head. We can no longer admit that we're disciples of the Sword Collection Palace. But what about our innocent brothers and sisters? He didn't do anything bad. Do I have to be treated as a fool and a bad guy, forever carrying a bad name? Yu Zijian clenched her fists firmly. Her voice trembled as her eyes moistened. But she did not shed any tears. Fu Qingjin shuddered inside. He looked at Yu Zijian deeply. With her gentle nature, the pain she felt must have been much deeper than theirs. Sigh unknowingly. You've become stronger than I am. Li Xiaoyao was also speechless. His face was full of shame. Yu Zijian shook her head and said apologetically, Sorry, I shouldn't have said something like that. I've made things difficult for you. But I really can't just leave like this. Senior Fu, thank you for taking care of me all these years. There was also Xiaoyao. You've cultivated bitterly for so many years, and finally survived the heavenly tribulation. It's time for you to be free and unfettered. Otherwise, it would be a waste of its name. His smile vanished in a flash before becoming determined again. He gazed at heaven's leaning peak in the distance. I'll pay for the sins that the Sword Collection Palace has committed. Fu Qingjin and Li Xiao looked at her back from afar. Her thin shoulders seemed to bear all the sins and notoriety, a burden that did not belong to her. They could not help but look at each other. Fu Qingjin let out a long sigh. Zijian, oh Zijian. You've really embarrassed the two of us with your actions. Fu Qingjin smiled. I'm not. Yu Zijian waved her hand in a fluster, but she had no idea how to explain herself. You know that I'm just a piece of trash who only knows how to sigh in the ruins. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even know how to continue living. Please let me go with you. Fu Qingjin bowed slightly. Senior Aunt Yu, I'll continue being a disciple of the Sword Collection Palace. Although I seem to be the only disciple, I definitely won't disappoint you. You don't have to force yourself. I'm not forcing myself. I don't think as much as you do. However, if I become a great swordsman in the future, and someone asks me whether I come from the Sword Collection Palace, how should I answer? I might as well just admit it. I'll be able to face my seniors and juniors, and I'll be able to face the sword in my hand. You're fantastic. Yu Zijian cheered and embraced them, diluting her sorrow and melancholy. A snake won't leave without a head. Since the Sword Collection Palace is still standing, there should be a palace lord. Fu Qingjin smiled. Yeah, although there's only a single disciple, there still needs to be a palace lord. Li Xiaoyao looked at Yu Zijian with a smile. Yu Zijian hesitated. All right, I'll be the palace lord. As a result, the position of the palace lord who had once shaken up the Green Province was decided in a few words. Greetings, palace lord. Fu Qingjin and Li Xiaoyao bowed towards her together. They were both serious, without the slightest disrespect. Yu Zijian wanted to dodge instinctively, but she still stood firmly and accepted it rather uncomfortably. Palace lord, if we want to rebuild the Sword Collection Palace, we'll probably have to find another land of spiritual energy. Fortunately, there's plenty of empty land in the Green Province now, so it won't be difficult to find, said Li Xiaoyao. I know a few suitable places. We can investigate them, said Fu Qingjin. No, let's go to Heaven's Leaning Peak first. Yu Zijian pointed at the mountains in the distance. Li Xiaoyao was taken aback. Why were they going to Heaven's Leaning Peak at a time like this? Were they going to take back Heaven's Leaning Peak from the monks? That was impossible. Though, it's said that Senior Aunt Yu is extremely familiar with my second uncle. If she has his support, there's some hope. However, Fu Qingjin seemed to understand something. The dauntless monk turned around and said to the young monk, "Pass down my orders. Prepare to receive the master of the Sword Collection Palace." "Yes, Abbot." The young monk tossed aside his broom and jogged all the way to the grand hall. A while later, a bell rang out. The entire mountain was filled with bells and drums. The monks gathered, all filled with curiosity. Didn't the master of the Sword Collection Palace die a long time ago? And even if he was still alive, he would be a mortal enemy of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga. So why was he still receiving him so politely? Yu Zijian, Li Xiaoyao, and Li Xiaoyao ascended the mountain on foot, which left the monks even more surprised. Wasn't their cultivation a little too weak? And apart from the nameless junior at the very back, they did not even have a sword on them, yet they were still sword cultivators. Li Xiaoyao walked along the familiar mountain path, surrounded by the monks. He felt extremely uneasy and uncomfortable inside. However, he noticed that Yu Zijian's expression became sterner and sterner. She was no longer as gentle as usual. She really did possess the bearing of a palace lord. Did she want to negotiate with the dauntless monk? Reaching the top of the mountain, a tall, stern-faced monk stood there. Li Xiaoyao's cultivation was too low in the past, so his senses were extremely limited. Only now did he understand what a great cultivator was like. Their bearing was basically like a mountain. He could not help but hold his breath. Then, he thought about how his second uncle had glared at him. He thought about how this monk could not be even more powerful, which was why he relaxed slightly. However, the thought of returning the Heaven's Leaning Peak had vanished. Master of the Sword Collection Palace Yu Zijian, along with Elder Fu Qingjin and disciple Li Xiaoyao, greets the dauntless abbot. "Please come into the hall, Palace Lord." The dauntless monk looked at her in some surprise and gave her sufficient politeness. However, Yu Zijian turned him down, expressing that she was not a guest. Afterwards, she publicly apologized to the Chan Monastery of Devanaga as the master of the Sword Collection Palace. She also handed over all the mountains, including the Heaven's Leaning Peak, to the Chan Monastery of Devanaga as compensation. The sun set, and the sunlight dispersed. Afterwards, it was a long night. Chapter 1144. Li Qingshan lazily lay on a banyan leaf that was as wide as a boat. The autumn sun shone on his belly, making him feel slightly tipsy. Of course, the hundreds of jars of wine he drank might be the main culprit, but what did it matter? A gentle breeze blew, making him feel comfortable. "Qingshan, you have been lying here for 10 days. The banyan tree king's voice echoed in the cloud-like canopy. "Please raise it a little higher." "Okay, that's it." Li Qingshan changed the angle of the banyan leaf to make it easier for him to bask in the sun. Suddenly, he realized the banyan tree king's words. He tilted his head and said, 10 days? Is it that long? Heh, it seems like I just drank my first cup. As he spoke, he grabbed a wine jar and gulped it down. With a casual toss, the wine jar disappeared into a cloud mountain in the sky. Then, he lay down comfortably and burped. In a half-singing and half-singing manner, he said, "Drinking and singing, life is short. How can I solve my worries? Only do Kong." I didn't expect the legendary demon king of the North Moon to be so decadent. There was a flash of white light in the depths of the mountain, descending from the sky and hovering above the canopy. It turned into a woman in white. Her skin was as white as milk, and her beautiful face gave off a sense of holiness. She looked down at Li Qingshan from above, but the most eye-catching part about her was the pair of pure white wings on her back. Angel? Li Qingshan was confused. Oh, mutant. He vaguely recalled this race. The word mutant made the woman in white frown. She corrected, "It's a god." "You must be crazy." Li Qingshan laughed loudly, the canopy swaying. The woman's expression changed. She actually felt a majestic pressure from this laughter. This Li Qingshan really lived up to his reputation. She was a little more respectful. I am Bai Jie from the Cloud God Nation. I am the Golden Deacon of the palace. I am here on the orders of my king to invite you to the God Nation. What is your name? Li Qingshan was stunned. Bai Jie. The woman proudly repeated. Good name. The corners of Li Qingshan's mouth curled up slightly as he scrutinized Bai Jie from head to toe. Bai Jie felt inexplicably unhappy, but she suppressed the disgust in her heart and said, Please come with me. I'm not going, Li Qingshan said. You actually refused? This is an invitation from the city amongst the clouds. Do you know how many people want to ascend to the city amongst the clouds, but are unable to? Bai Jie said in disbelief. Go away, you're blocking me from the sun. Li Qingshan waved his hand impatiently. Okay, I hope you won't regret it. Bai Jie turned into a white light and disappeared into the horizon. Li Qingshan watched them leave as he drank. Why did you refuse? Asked the banyan tree king. Stop pretending. Can't you feel it? Li Qingshan suddenly had a flash of inspiration. A big banyan tree pretending to be strong, ha 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 ha. After grasping the spirit turtle transformation and comprehending the laws of the world, his senses had become sharper and sharper. The invitation this time was not out of the hospitality of the minority brothers. There was clearly hidden danger. Because of this, you shouldn't have refused, said the banyan tree king. With Li Qingshan's personality, why would he be afraid of any danger? I don't want a woman right now, nor do I want an enemy. Sigh. You seem to really don't want me to stay here? What do you think? The banyan tree king countered with a question. Even the sky darkened. The alcohol that Li Qingshan had been drinking these days was all brewed by him. Li Qingshan was still picky about the taste, so he used the laws of the world to make these wines reach the effect of being aged for 100 years, or even 1,000 years. Many cultivators would not be able to see so much precious spiritual wine in their entire lives. This guy drank several hundred jars like drinking water. Li Qingshan was like a person who lived at home eating off his elders. When he had nothing to do, he would drink a little and go crazy. Obviously, the elders could not stand it. Didn't I do it to protect Little Anne? Li Qingshan spread out his hands. Little Anne was still cultivating under the tree, refining the white bone arcane artifacts again. She doesn't need you to protect her. The banyan tree king exposed his excuse without holding back at all. He asked, Don't you have the will to ascend to the 9 heavens? There's no hurry, there's no hurry. The drunkenness in Li Qingshan's eyes vanished, and he recovered his clarity. He stared at the distant sky. He did not just lie there to slack off and rest. His cultivation of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine had reached a relatively stable level. Drinking so much of this spiritual wine was also preparation for further cultivation. Fine then. I was just afraid that your will would weaken, so I gave you a reminder. Do you still want to drink? Ha, I won't drink anymore, or I'll really fall out with you. Li Qingshan leapt up and cracked his neck. Tell me about the Featherfolk. The Featherfolk are one of the 7 great Otherfolk races. Their surname is Bai, and they're proud and reserved. They claim to be true descendants of gods and look down on other races, including other folk. As for humans and demons, there's no need to even mention them. They've established a divine kingdom in the sky called the City Amongst the Clouds, which is different from the divine kingdoms of other folk on earth. It's said that from birth until death, their feet never touch the soil. What a weirdo. Don't they know what era this is? Didn't they deal with these guys when Great Xiao was founded? Li Qingshan asked curiously. The Featherfolk are one of the races that have been affected the least by war. Although they possess extraordinary strength, they naturally loathe conflict and killing, so there's very little internal strife. Ever since the age of the Divine Kingdom, they've rarely involved themselves in battles on the surface. They'll only take action when demon folk invade en masse. They've all turned the tables at crucial moments, and they've been viewed as a decisive force against the demon domain. When Great Xiao was founded, they maintained neutrality the entire time. After that, they seemed to have signed some sort of agreement, and they did not engage in war. After that, traces of them rarely appeared. Most of the city amongst the clouds are stationed in the eastern cloud province, or they drift across the ocean. The Banyan Tree King demonstrated his vast knowledge once again. It sounds like they're a race filled with greatness, light, and justice. If you add in freedom and democracy, they'll basically be ungovernable. Though why would a race like that come to make trouble for me? Perhaps the invasion of the demon domain has drawn their attention. As for why they've come to find you, that's difficult to guess. You were right to turn down the invitation. After 5,000 years of development, the Featherfolk's strength is probably only second to Great Xia. They really can't be underestimated. Li Qingshan deeply agreed. Other folk possessed extraordinary talent in the first place. If they expanded on a larger scale, there would definitely be quite a few third heavenly tribulation cultivators. However, as long as he did not go to the city amongst the clouds, the Featherfolk could not do anything to him, so there was no need for him to worry too much. It's time for me to go for a walk. Li Qingshan extended his hand into the azura field and pulled out his In's wildflower blade. The wounds on it had all recovered. It shone brightly and seemed even sharper. Before he ascended, there were still many things he had to settle. Dragon King of the Sea, I'm coming. At the same time, a streak of white light shot into the palace hidden in the clouds thousands of kilometers away. He turned it down. Yes. How's his strength? It's no small matter, but he's nowhere near invincible, much less His Majesty. Chapter 1145. On a lonely island in the Ink Sea, Chu Danqing was focused on painting. The Dragon King of the Sea stood with his hands behind his back, giving him guidance from time to time. Suddenly, he looked back, and a pair of dragon eyes appeared in his blank eyes. Danqing, let's stop here for today. Yes, master. Leave the Ink Sea. Chu Danqing was shocked. He's here. Do we really have to fight? We have to fight. The Dragon King of the Sea walked out of the house. His gaze crossed the sea and met a pair of scarlet eyes. Li Qingshan's back was facing the setting sun. He stood on a black reef. The sea breeze carried the scent of ink, and his scarlet hair fluttered in the wind. Filled with curiosity, he bent down like a big cat. He did not know what the Ink Sea water tasted like. Hey, you over there. You can't drink the seawater. A fisherman was driving his fishing boat back to shore. When he saw this, he could not help but shout a warning. Li Qingshan raised his head and glanced at the fisherman. He saw that the scarlet hair was not dyed red by the setting sun. The pair of scarlet eyes seemed to contain magic, causing him to keep quiet out of fear. Li Qingshan still ended up drinking a mouthful of seawater. The bitter and salty taste spread through his mouth, and he gulped it down with a gulp. He extended his blackened tongue and muttered to himself, "It really is disgusting, but the taste is rather special." He then waved at the fisherman. "Hey brother, go home quickly. The storm is coming." Okay. The fisherman came back to his senses and quickly rowed the boat. Li Qingshan took out a scroll and unfurled it. It was the 3 Absolutes calligraphy personally drawn by the 5 Absolutes Immortal. He looked at it carefully again. From the time he obtained the first cursive sword calligraphy in the Black Wind Stronghold, until now, everything related to it appeared in his mind. In the end, he threw it into the Ink Sea. The 3 Absolutes calligraphy floated on the burning sea, and gradually sank into the sea. The sharp, sword-like handwriting on the scroll gradually melted in the Ink Sea. Li Qingshan smiled. The Dragon King of the Sea did not refuse. This was good. He looked back at the fisherman who was rowing the boat. He couldn't help but shake his head. Leaping up, he put his hands together and shouted, "People of Mahai Sea, listen up, the storm is coming." The sound waves swept across the sea. It spread throughout the entire Ink Sea. It reverberated. It was like an oracle. Countless people revealed expressions of shock, and then began to row their boats with all their might away from the ocean. Qingshan. Chu Danqing heard this voice. He suddenly abandoned the Dragon King of the Sea and flew towards the source of the sound. Not long after he left the small island, a dragon's roar resounded behind him. The island was engulfed by the raging waves. A majestic black dragon was entrenched on the island, its sharp dragon claws gripping the mountain rocks. Its huge body was faintly discernible in the huge waves. It raised its head and roared, as if it was responding to Li Qingshan. "Sigh! Chu Danqing frowned and let out a long sigh. He increased his speed, but the churning of the seawater below was already spreading towards the shore at an even faster speed. The sky quickly darkened. The multicolored light dimmed and disappeared. The sky was dark and gloomy. A huge wave slammed against the black reef. The splashing waves landed on Li Qingshan's face. His emotions were like the sea in front of him, faintly beginning to churn. A black dot flew over from the sea. Li Qingshan waved his hand. Danqing, long time no see. Qingshan, don't fight. I'm begging you. Chu Danqing landed in front of the black Qingshan, grabbed his shoulder, and said while panting, "The disciple of the Dragon King of the Sea should not be begging others so easily." Li Qingshan was still smiling, his fighting spirit burning even more fiercely. "I'm not only doing this for my master, but also for my friends. I don't want to see anything happen to either of you." Chu Danqing tried to persuade him. "No one will die. Your master's true body is not here, is it? Li Qingshan, do you think you will win?" The deep voice of the Dragon King of the Sea came from the sea, as if the entire sea was speaking. Of course, Li Qingshan was full of confidence, even if this was the home ground of the Dragon King of the Sea. In this battle, there would be no helpers, and there would be no Nirvana rebirth. It was just him and the Dragon King of the Sea. This was no longer for revenge, but to test himself to see if he had the power to surpass the 10 demon kings. Arrogant. With an angry roar, the shadow of a black dragon soared into the sky. The rolling mountains in the sea seemed to be about to connect with the dark clouds that were pressing down. The dragon's shadow danced between the clouds and the sea. Bang! Rocks flew everywhere, and the reef under Li Qingshan's feet was crushed. He curled his lips. "So stingy, Qingshan." Chu Danqing wanted to persuade him again, but Li Qingshan suddenly looked straight into his eyes and said with a straight face, "Go away." Chu Danqing let go of his hand involuntarily. Li Qingshan patted his shoulder and said with a smile, "If you have nothing better to do, come and paint a picture." Chu Danqing watched blankly as Li Qingshan stepped into the rolling sea of ink. In the blink of an eye, he was swallowed by the sea and disappeared. Then, a huge mountain rushed out of the sea of ink and stood between heaven and earth. A pair of curved horns tore through the clouds, filled with an unyielding fighting spirit. A pair of gorgeous and dazzling wings with a wingspan of thousands of feet glowed with the brilliance of divinity. Waves crashed against the huge mountain, but they could not move it at all. On the contrary, the surrounding seawater gradually calmed down and became as smooth as a mirror. Li Qingshan stepped forward and advanced toward the center of the sea of ink. Everywhere he went, the violent sea became calm, forming a great contrast with the surrounding turbulent waves. The cold seawater hit his face, and Chu Danqing suddenly quivered. He flew high into the sky and spread out a piece of white paper in front of him. He held the weasel brush tightly in his right hand and stared at the sea. At this moment, Gu Yinying and Si Bao rushed over and stared at the sea of ink. "Sister, they really want to fight," Si Bao exclaimed. "Who can stop them? Let's just watch." Gu Yinying spread her hands. "Fighting is good. It's all your fault for making me go into seclusion. I missed a lot of good shows." Si Bao was extremely excited, her thick eyebrows flying high. On the other hand, Gu Yinying had a helpless expression. "Sister, who do you think will win?" Si Bao took out a bag of dried fruits and ate one, crushing it together with the core. "Theoretically, no one can defeat the Dragon King of the Sea in the Ink Sea," Gu Yinying said. "But he's always out of theory, right? I really didn't expect that this brat would be so strong now." Si Bao thought of the battles she had missed and couldn't help but feel regret and anticipation. The tall statue of the first king of Chu pressed down on his sword and looked at the magnificent sea of ink. He also seemed to fall into silence. In the majestic South Hub city behind him, the cultivators climbed up the city walls to watch the battle, but they only saw the sky and earth change color. It was a shocking scene. Li Qingshan was about to reach the center of the ink sea. The waves became more and more violent, and the seawater around him rippled. The dragon's roar was faintly discernible in the wind and waves, but it never stopped and slowly wrapped around him. Chapter 1146. Break. The clouds split, and the sea split. Li Qingshan suddenly turned around and met the eyes of a dragon head. Its jagged dragon horns pointed to the sky, and its ink-black mane danced in the wind. At the same time, it let out an angry roar. The tiger's roar and dragon's roar shook the entire ink sea. The wind suddenly became 10 times stronger, stirring up the world into chaos. At the top of South Hub City, the cultivators hurriedly cast spells to resist the strong wind blowing against their faces. The strong smell of ink and blood still made them feel dizzy, and they looked at the magnificent sea with fear. This was the power of the North Moon Demon King, and the Dragon King of the Sea. Li Qingshan had just raised his long blade when he was thrown into the sea by a strong force. His vision was filled with the vigorous dragon's body, flowing like a great river, coiling around the majestic body of the demon god. It was as if the ink sea was pressing on his body. His limbs were in pain, and he was firmly locked by the sharp dragon claws, sinking into the dark ink sea. The ink sea seemed bottomless, sinking endlessly. He heard the deep voice of the Dragon King of the Sea mixed with the dragon's roar. Li Qingshan, this is the biggest mistake you've made in your life. Maybe the victory at Great Buddha Mountain made you arrogant, and this will be your burial ground. The dragon's teeth intersected, blood splattered, and he felt a sharp pain in his neck. These words sound very familiar. Also, arrogance is just your illusion. Li Qingshan's smile turned into rage, and the tiger stripes quickly spread, forming a king character on his forehead. The dragon's claws and teeth pierced deeper and deeper into his body, and the pain was like pouring oil on fire, turning his rage into rage. The wings of the wind god suddenly expanded, breaking the water for 1,000 miles. Bang! A red tiger leaped out of the ink sea, and its long tail curled around the long blade. It quickly swept across the surface of the sea and slashed the dragon's body. Wherever the blade passed, huge arc-shaped waves thousands of feet high appeared on the surface of the sea, like a curtain rising into the sky, covering the dragon and tiger. The curtain rose and fell. The Dragon King was cut in half, and the red tiger broke free, proudly standing between heaven and earth. Good strong. Sibao was dazzled. Although she was a princess and had experienced hundreds of battles, a battle of this level was simply unheard of. Forget about the Dragon King of the Sea. What shocked her even more was that Li Qingshan did not seem to be at a disadvantage in such an absolutely disadvantageous situation. Instead, he seemed to be winning. This is just the beginning, Gu Yining said. If that was all the Dragon King in the Ink Sea was capable of, then he would not be able to do anything. Then she wouldn't have come to watch this battle at all. Indeed, when the two halves of the Dragon King of the Sea fell into the sea, they turned into 2 giant dragons and soared into the sky. They were no smaller than they were just now. They spiraled and flew toward Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan's figure turned, and the saber light was like a wheel. A huge ring-shaped wave was set off in the sea. The Dragon King of the Sea was cut in half again, but in the blink of an eye, he turned into 4 giant dragons. Not only did his aura not weaken, but it also increased. Saber lights tore through the pitch-black sky like lightning, cutting the Dragon King of the Sea again and again. However, the dragon shadows between the sea and the sky increased. They surrounded Li Qingshan, as if he was in a deep quagmire. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. How can he win? Sibao's heart trembled. She could not distinguish the true form of the Dragon King of the Sea. Or perhaps there was no such thing as true form. The Ink Sea was the Dragon King. The Dragon King was the Ink Sea. If the Ink Sea did not die, the Dragon King would not die. It can only be considered a neutral game, girl. Watch carefully. This might be your family's greatest enemy, Gu Yining said. My family's greatest enemy? Sibao raised her eyebrows and exhaled again. She said disapprovingly, I don't want to become enemies with him for some random plan. Gu Yining smiled and patted her head. Her pair of eagle eyes were still the same, piercing through the barrier of the storm and the waves, staring at the depths of the Ink Sea. Li Qingshan, at this stage, do you still think you can win? The 100 ink dragons spoke at the same time. The sea of clouds that had been torn apart closed again, condensing into an even thicker and gloomier cloud mountain. Becoming one with the entire ink sea is indeed an impressive move. If you did not ask such a stupid question, I would be even more impressed. Li Qingshan spread his arms, as if he wanted to embrace the entire sea and sky. Come. The dragon roar resounded through the sky and sea. The clouds fell, and the sea churned. It was as if the world was toppling over, wanting to crush Li Qingshan into pieces. Looking around, the 100 giant dragons charged over together. Li Qingshan leaped up, demonic energy bursting forth, battle demon possession. Dazzling saber light, a madman at the end of his road. The flow of time seemed to slow down. Every movement was so clear that it was as if it was frozen. Raising his hand, raising his eyebrows, spinning, swinging his saber. The wind blew. The tiger demon danced wildly. In a daze, Li Qingshan vanished, turning into a storm that blazed like fire, flickering with sharpness like a sharp blade. The whistling wind was like a war song, ripping apart the clouds, the sea of ink, and the colossal dragon. Haha, you think you can defeat me with just numbers? If you are the ink sea, then I will crush the entire ink sea. The Crimson Storm went on a rampage. No matter how many incarnations the Dragon King of the Sea turned into, they could do nothing to him. For a moment, a black rainstorm fell from the sky, dispersed by the storm, and the ink sea swayed. The Dragon King of the Sea was silent. Unknowingly, he had already become so powerful. Finally, it's time to decide the victor, Gu Yinying muttered to herself. The many dragon shadows gathered into one again, staring at the Crimson Storm. 1,000 years entering the painting. With the deep voice of the Dragon King of the Sea, the storm, the sea, the clouds, and the rainstorm froze in an instant. All the colors disappeared. All the sounds faded, leaving only the silence of black and white, like a magnificent painting. Chu Danqing's body was drenched by the rainstorm. His right hand grasped the weasel bristle brush tightly, staring at the churning sea, but did not descend. He was concerned about both sides, and he did not want to see either side lose. His heart was full of contradictions and conflicts. At this moment, his eyes suddenly lit up, and jade blood spurted out. He no longer had any anxiety, and only a painting was left in his heart. Li Qingshan was dazed for a moment, and found that he had returned to his human form. He looked at his right hand, which was covered in thick black ink, as if it was painted by an extremely skilled painter, vivid and lifelike. It seemed strange to use such a term to describe himself, but it did feel so. Originally, I did not want to use this move, borrowing the power of heaven and earth, and even the 5 ultimate powers, on this ink sea is too unfair. The Dragon King of Ink Sea, or rather Imo Wuhan, walked over. Black ripples spread out under his feet, from deep to shallow. It was extremely mysterious. His figure kept changing between a human and a dragon, but it gave off a natural feeling. However, Li Qingshan felt like he was completely isolated from heaven and earth, unable to absorb any spiritual chi of heaven and earth. He could not even feel the existence of the earth. He understood that this was the true home ground of the Dragon King of the Sea. The victor is king. What's the point of martial arts? You speak as if you have already won. Chapter 1147. Heaven and earth were silent. The sound of wind, rain, and waves all merged into the painting. What was constantly changing was the ink-colored man and dragon. Between the movements, there were long traces of ink, and the speed was extremely fast. 2 vigorous and elegant ink traces crisscrossed back and forth, sometimes joining and sometimes separating, faster and faster. In the end, they seemed to be entangled together, forming a whirlpool that spun rapidly, and the picture scroll was chaotic. Everyone was watching this shocking battle. Only Chu Danqing was focused on the painting in front of him. Blood flowed from his wrist to the tip of the brush, galloping in the painting. Green blood of vermilion, blood turned into ink. His face gradually paled, and his spirit became more vigorous with some fanaticism. He threw everything in the world to the back of his mind, and only focused on the painting in front of him. Gu Yinying also looked back in surprise, then turned back to continue watching the battle. After an unknown period of time, there was a sudden crack. It was very soft but very clear, as if it rang in everyone's heart, breaking the silence between the sea and the sky. A figure fell from the sky and landed in the ink sea with a plop, then slowly floated up. It was Li Qingshan. His eyes were tightly shut, and he floated motionlessly on the surface of the sea. His long scarlet hair spread out, and one of his left legs and one of his right arms had disappeared. His body was riddled with wounds, but the wounds weren't filled with fresh blood, but with black ink. Gu Yinying heaved a sigh of relief, but it turned into a sigh. The winner has been decided. He died in battle? Bao was in disbelief. Gu Yinying shook her head. He won. Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes and looked up at the sky quietly. A smile appeared on his lips. Dragon King, you lost. Before he finished speaking, there was a cacophony of cracking sounds, which turned from soft to booming, echoing throughout the ink sea. The painting gradually collapsed and fell into the sea. Color returned to heaven and earth. It was the last ray of sunset. All the spectators were in a trance. It turned out that the battle had only lasted for such a short time. Mo Wuhan suddenly appeared again, standing on the sea. He was only a few feet away from Li Qingshan's head. He looked down at him. What, do you still want to fight? Li Qingshan raised his head and stared at him. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged into his body, and the divine power of the earth gave him an endless source of power. The flames of the phoenix burned. He removed the black stain and healed his injuries. Even the broken limbs, reborn in the curl of the flames. 1,000 Autumns painting is indeed an extremely powerful move, especially in this ink sea. However, you're still no match for my fist. Li Qingshan raised his new right fist in the flames. The power of vibration was indeed very good at restraining such methods. The ending flower blade made a soft sound. Yes, there's still a blade. The Dragon King of the Sea did not say a word, nor did he make a move. He was well aware of one thing. Even if he had the entire ink sea to rely on, he would not be able to crush Li Qingshan. He would only be able to hold on for a while longer, and not be defeated so quickly. To put it simply, the Dragon King of the Sea's destructive power could not penetrate the tortoiseshell and cowhide to crush Li Qingshan's tiger bones and extinguish the phoenix's flames. It's very strange. You actually don't have any innate mystical powers, Li Qingshan said. Although the Dragon King of the Sea had used various methods, none of them could be considered as true innate mystical powers. To the demon race, mystical powers were the foundation of everything. If the Dragon King of the Sea had any kind of offensive mystical powers that could truly condense and release the enormous power of the ink sea, the outcome of the battle would be uncertain. However, what he found strange was that the former Qingzhou demon race crown prince Mou, a fellow who was countless times weaker than the Dragon King of the Sea, could also use innate mystical powers. Because I am not a demon. The Dragon King of the Sea finally spoke. Oh, you turned Mou from a painting into a demon, but you still can't help yourself? It's really depressing to think about it. The fellow I've always viewed as a strong enemy is actually just a painting, or rather, a painting's soul. Li Qingshan shook his head and suddenly leaped up, smashing Mo Wuhan into pieces with a punch. Ink droplets splattered all over the sky. However, regardless of whether you want to fight or not, I won't stop until I completely defeat you. Mo Wuhan's figure condensed in the distant sky again, nodding slightly at Li Qingshan. If he were to stop just like that, that would be the greatest insult. However, it was not his style to be entangled blindly, knowing that he was no match for Mo Wuhan. The dragon eyes in his eyes dispersed and became blank again. His expression suddenly became a little bleak. At this moment, Chu Danqing completed the final stroke. What he depicted was not the process of the fierce battle, but the scene of the dragon and tiger roaring at each other. The fierce battle that followed seemed to be integrated into the painting, giving people endless imagination. He revealed a pale smile, and the aura all over his body weakened to the extreme. Only then did he suddenly realize that the battle had already ended. He looked around for the Dragon King of the Sea's figure, and suddenly a voice sounded behind him. Good painting, Master. Chu Danqing turned around. The Dragon King of the Sea was looking at the painting with blank eyes, sighing in admiration. You have already obtained some of the essence of the five absolutes painting Tao. You can slowly cultivate it now. Master you. Chu Danqing seemed to sense something. You've been out for so long. It's time to return. The Dragon King of the Sea faintly said. Suddenly, he waved his sleeves, and the ink sea violently roiled again. A circle of coastline gradually lost its ink color and condensed towards the center of the sea. The last drop of ink rose into the sky and floated in the Dragon King of the Sea's palm. It shot into Chu Danqing's dantian, fusing into his limbs, soul, and consciousness and surging through his blood vessels. As for the ink sea below, it turned a deep blue color. The influence of the five absolutes immortals' 10,000 years of existence had been eliminated, turning into a deep blue sea. After doing all this, the Dragon King of the Sea's figure dissipated with the wind. Chu Danqing stretched out his hand, but only touched the warm sea breeze. At the same time, in the distant void, an ink dragon gradually appeared on a snow-white painting wall. It was vigorous and wanted to fly, but its eyes were blank. It seemed powerless, and could only be trapped on the wall. Two figures vaguely appeared. One was an azure-robed man, and the other was a yellow-robed man. The yellow-robed man asked, "Fellow Taoist, why did you stop? You only drew the dragon and not the eye. That is a great loss of charm." The azure-robed man answered, "Just touching it will allow me to ascend beyond the heavens." "Forget it." "Oh, that's fine, that's fine." The yellow-robed man had a look of disbelief. Cultivators had bitterly cultivated for thousands of years. It was extremely difficult for them to ascend. How could a mere painting dare to say that they could ascend beyond the heavens? It was simply ridiculous. The azure-robed man did not seem to notice. He smiled and looked at the dragon in the painting. The sun set and the moon rose, sprinkling down clear light. Chu Danqing recalled all his experiences over the years, and could not help but cry. He wiped them with his sleeves. His sleeves were stained with ink, and he could not help but be stunned. "Danqing, are you all right?" Li Qingshan came over and asked with concern. He saw that Chu Danqing's entire body was pitch black. He could almost become invisible in the darkness. It was truly pitch black like ink. Even the whites of his eyes were completely black. Chu Danqing looked at his hands. He understood that the Dragon King of the Sea had used an extraordinary method to absorb all the power of the ink sea into his body. He could not help but feel even more sorrowful and cried bitterly. "Hey, don't cry. It's such a waste." Li Qingshan knew that Chu Danqing could not control this power at all, let alone digest it. "Qingshan, do you still keep your promise?" Chu Danqing wiped his tears and asked Li Qingshan. "Of course." Li Qingshan smiled. "The painting tomb is about to open." Chapter 1148. The phoenix flew across the sky, heading for the ink sea. A girl holding a saber stood on the back of the phoenix, looking at the surging winds and clouds in the distance. She pointed her saber and said rudely and childishly, "Hey, hurry up. It has already begun." I know. If I wasn't afraid that you would fall, why would I fly so slowly? Don't feed me all the time. I'm your brother after all." Li Fengyuan sped up, and was also anxious to watch the battle. He muttered, "Old father is really too much. He actually didn't inform me about this." "Shut up." The tiger girl had just opened her mouth when a gust of wind blew into it. She staggered and couldn't stand steadily, so she quickly lay down. Li Fengyuan chuckled. "Little girl, let's see who's going to shut up." Suddenly, a white light descended from the sky and blocked their path. Bai Jie said with a solemn expression, "Divine bird Phoenix, my king invites you to the city amongst the clouds. Go away, a good dog doesn't block the way." Li Fengyuan flapped its wings impatiently and tried to go around it. "As I said, my king has invited you to the city amongst the clouds." With a flash of light, Bai Jie blocked in front of him again. Her tone was even more unquestionable. The majestic divine bird Phoenix actually has such vulgar words. Like father, like son. You want to fight? Li Fengyuan's eyes widened. "It's not what I want, but I can't go against the king's order. If you insist, I can only use force." Bai Jie spread her wings and released rings of white light. displaying the extraordinary strength of a level 3 heavenly tribulation. I'd like to see what kind of tricks you have, you idiot. Li Fengyuan wasn't afraid at all. He spat out a wave of raging flames that instantly engulfed Bai Jie. A few white lights flashed, and a few light arrows pierced through the raging flames. Li Fengyuan dodged in panic. The arrow of light that passed by had left a few wounds on it, causing feathers to fall down. Bai Jie pulled the longbow in her hand, wrapped in white light, and said with disdain, "Even if it's a divine bird, he's just a demon commander." In her heart, however, she sighed with emotion. As expected of a phoenix, although her arrows were mostly probing, she did not hold back. As a result, not a single arrow hit its mark. This featherman isn't easy to deal with. Ordinary demon monarchs can't compare to him. It was better to leave first. Hold on tight, ouch. Li Fengyuan hadn't even finished speaking when the tiger girl's 10 fingers shot out sharp claws and tightly clasped onto his back. But at this moment she couldn't care less. With a phoenix cry, he spread his wings and flew high. In an instant, he turned into a beam of colorful light that shot toward the direction of Mo Hai. It was his innate ability, thousandly soaring phoenix. Bai Jie put away the longbow, turned into a white light, and followed closely behind. She was surprised to find that she couldn't easily surpass Li Fengyuan. If they really escaped to the Ink Sea, it would be troublesome. With a wave of his right hand, a pure white ribbon of light shot out. The colorful light turned, and Li Fengyuan avoided it. However, he felt the weight on his back lighten, and he looked back. "What? You don't want her anymore?" Bai Jie grabbed the tiger girl by the nape of her neck. The tiger girl roared and bared her fangs and claws. But how could she do anything to such a powerhouse? "Let her go." Li Fengyuan was furious. "She's of no use to me. If you come with me, I'll be able to help you." "I'll let her go," Bai Jie said with a smile. "Don't listen to this slut," the tiger girl roared. "How vulgar and despicable." Bai Jie frowned, and he immediately increased the strength in his hand. The tiger girl clenched her teeth, but didn't say a word. "Okay, I'll go with you," Li Fengyuan said. Bai Jie waved her sleeve, and ribbons of light flew out. They tied Li Fengyuan up firmly. "Let her go. If you dare to go back on your words, I'll... Hey, you'll what?" Bai Jie said. "I'll perish together with you." Would I lie to you?" Bai Jie said disdainfully, and casually threw the tiger girl away, turning into a white light that pierced through the sky. The tiger girl adjusted her figure in midair, using all 4 limbs to fly with the wind. She ran and chased, but she could only watch the white light disappear in the east. With a roar, she turned her head and looked at the Ink Sea. "However, aren't you afraid that I'll find your master's body and kill him again?" Li Qingshan asked Chu Danqing with a smile. Chu Danqing was stunned for a moment, and his expression changed, but it was hard to see the change of expression on his pitch-black face. "Then you better not come with me." "How can I go back on my words?" Li Qingshan laughed. "Don't worry, this is our final battle." Chu Danqing let out a sigh. This might be the best result. Congratulations, fellow Taoist, for a complete victory. Gu Yinying cupped her hands and congratulated him. Si Bao, who was beside her, looked at Li Qingshan from head to toe as if she was looking at a rare beast. "Of course," Li Qingshan said. "Danqing, you have to be prepared." Gu Yinying said sternly. "Yes, I'll go cultivate now." Chu Danqing turned around and left. Li Qingshan shook his head, spread his hands, and asked, "Commander Gu, how's my strength now?" "The 9 provinces are but a corner." In the past, she once said to him, "The Qing province stretches for 30,000 miles, and the Jianghu is but a corner." At that time, he was just a greenhorn in the Jianghu. Now the 9 provinces were like the Jianghu to him, and he wouldn't stay for long. "I owe you something. You can tell me now. Otherwise, when I ascend, it will be all for nothing. The time is not right. This matter cannot be forced." "Oh, is this strength not enough?" Li Qingshan was a little surprised. "According to my experience, everything that cannot be forced is mostly because you are not strong enough." "You can say that," Gu Yinying said. What do you want?" Li Qingshan looked at her deeply. "You will know when the time comes. However, if you want to ascend, go ahead. Don't worry too much about it." Gu Yinying opened her jade folding fan and waved it lightly. She was still as elegant as before, without the slightest hint of dependence. Li Qingshan showed admiration. This was still the Gu Yinying he knew. He looked around and saw a small figure running from the seaside. The figure flashed and arrived in front of the tiger girl. "Why are you here?" "Big brother was taken away," the tiger girl said, panting. "By who?" Li Qingshan frowned. "A white-winged slut," the tiger girl said through gritted teeth. "As expected, they came with ill intentions. Are you all right?" Li Qingshan patted her head. "I'm fine. If it wasn't for me." The tiger girl lowered her head, tears welling up in her eyes. She looked very sad. "All right, I'll save the kid." Li Qingshan scooped up the tiger girl. For once, he displayed some gentleness. "Who is the white-winged slut?" Gu Yinying suddenly asked. "A winged person called Bai Jia. She calls herself the Ji Jinwu." "Then the one who was taken away is Li Fengyuan, my son. Don't you know?" Chapter 1149. Gu Yinying said to Si Bao, "Bao take your child home first." "Okay." Si Bao came before Li Qingshan and extended her hands to the tigress girl. "Come with me." The tigress girl stared at her. "Go find your mother." Li Qingshan handed the tiger girl, who was filled with reluctance, to Si Bao and watched them leave. "Let's talk somewhere else," Gu Yinying said. "Where to?" Li Qingshan furrowed his brows as if a storm was gathering. "East Yunzhou. You don't need help? I heard that the winged men are not easy to deal with." Li Qingshan did not expect Gu Yinying to be so decisive. Although he could not wait to go to the city amongst the clouds and beat up his mother, then his whole family, and teach these damned kidnappers what the word death meant. "This matter is difficult to solve with strength alone. I'm still not strong enough," Li Qingshan said. His military exploits could be considered illustrious, but the winged men still dared to do this. They must be fearless. "You can say that." Gu Yinying flew higher into the sky and blended into the fierce astral winds. Li Qingshan followed closely behind. "The matter you want my help with is related to the winged men, right? To be more precise, it's related to the winged men king." The further east they went, the denser the clouds in the sky became. In the end, it was almost endless. The clouds were piled up and down, and thunder and lightning could be seen from time to time. Bai Jia brought Li Fengyuan and passed through the clouds. "Why does your king want to see me?" Li Fengyuan tried to break free, but the white belt of light was stronger than he imagined and firmly restrained his power. "You'll know when you get there," Bai Jia said. "Do you know who my father is?" "His surname is Li Qingshan. You know, like father, like son. Legend has it that the phoenix has 5 virtues: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and trust. You spoke rudely, which is rude. You asked such a stupid question, which is unwise. You promised to follow me to the city amongst the clouds, but you tried to escape, which is untrustworthy. You can only be considered a little benevolent. I may be rude, unwise, and untrustworthy, so that I can be as shameless as you." Bai Jia let out a cold snort and shook the white ribbon. Li Fengyuan fell into the black cloud mountain that was flashing with lightning and rumbling thunder. When he was lifted up again, the feathers on his body were standing up and he shouted, "Shameless! Shameless! Shameless! Call me whatever you want. I can't be bothered to stoop to your level. Shameless woman, you're in big trouble now." After flying for an unknown period of time, a city suddenly appeared between the clouds. Towering white palaces seemed to be formed from white clouds, shining white in the sunlight. However, upon closer inspection, only the tallest palace in the center was truly pure white. The surrounding palaces were slightly inferior, gradually turning milky white and even grayish white. However, they all had the same texture of clouds, lightly floating high up in the sky. One by one, the winged people spread their wings and soared between the clouds. All of them were beautiful and wore broad clothes. Their words and actions were elegant, and they emitted a tranquil and auspicious aura. "This is the city amongst the clouds," Bai Jia said proudly. "What's so great about it?" Li Fengyuan said disdainfully. A pair of tall cloud pillars could be considered the city gate. The cloud pillars were engraved with layers of cloud patterns, and a strange sculpture with a human face and bird's body sat on top of the cloud pillars. It wore a pointed crown on its head. The instant Li Fengyuan crossed the cloud pillars, he seemed to have entered another world. That tranquil and auspicious aura seemed to invade his body. Bai Jie, don't be rude to our guest. Hurry up and untie him. A clear and sonorous voice came from the tallest palace. Yes. After arriving at the city amongst the clouds, Bai Jie wasn't afraid of letting Li Fengyuan escape. She waved her sleeve and retrieved the white ribbon. Li Fengyuan stretched his body and said calmly, "Let's go. Let me see your king." The graceful and dignified bearing of the phoenix's inheritance was displayed. Moreover, he had the decisiveness of "I'll go against thousands of people." Bai Jie's expression was somewhat astonished. Just now at that moment she actually felt a trace of shame. This was the bearing that a phoenix should have. On the spotless white street, the feather men lined the streets to welcome him. They sprinkled flowers and played their zither, as if they were truly welcoming a distinguished guest. Bai Jie also took a step back and followed behind, letting him enjoy this honor alone. Li Fengyuan stepped on the soft clouds and walked forward calmly. The phoenix never lacked glory, nor did it need glory. When he arrived in front of the palace in the center of the city, there were 2 rows of cloud pillars in the plaza in front of the palace. On top of each pillar sat a sculpture with a human face and bird's body. However, there was a subtle difference in their expressions. When he passed through the plaza, he would feel that he was constantly being watched. Climbing up the tall steps, Li Fengyuan looked up and saw the 3 large words, "Divine Feather Palace," shining brightly under the sunlight. "Quickly invite him in." The clear and magnificent voice came from the palace again. Li Fengyuan acted as if he didn't hear it. He looked left and right, and admired the carvings on the palace gate. Bai Jie reached out and pushed him into the palace. The palace was filled with intoxicating incense. There were many crane-shaped incense burners emitting white smoke. The warm sunlight poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, making the palace seem even more spacious. A figure was faintly discernible in the smoke. "Welcome, Divine Bird Phoenix." A handsome and sunny man stood up from the white jade throne and opened his arms. The pure white wings that were originally folded behind him suddenly spread out with his movement, scattering the smoke. They emitted an invisible light that made the sunlight dim. "My name is Li Fengyuan, King of Feathermen by Chun." "You're about to die," Li Fengyuan said. "What did you say?" The King of Feathermen calmly walked down from the throne. His long white robe trailed behind him. He smiled and said, "Who can kill me?" Whether it was power or influence, he was at the top of this world. "Time," Li Fengyuan said. "Oh." The King of Feathermen lowered his eyes. "No matter how strong the incense is, it can't hide the stench on your body." Li Fengyuan sniffed. Although it wasn't actually a smell, it was more like an intuition, an aura of aging and decadence. Maintaining a youthful appearance is just deceiving yourself, not to mention that pretentious tone of voice. "You aren't the light of the day, but the twilight." As expected of the divine bird phoenix, not all life forms can live forever like you. Even celestials have 5 periods of decline. But please show some respect. It's good for both of us. The King of Feathermen's expression darkened. As he frowned, wrinkles began to spread. Even his voice became deep and hoarse like an old man. Li Fengyuan suddenly felt that he couldn't breathe. He was obviously so old, but he was also so powerful, as vast as the sky. Glancing at the base of the Featherman King's pure white wings, he suddenly found a little bit of color. It was a pale blue feather, but it was better than all the other pure white feathers, which made him feel a sense of familiarity. He raised his head and said, "What do you want from me?" "Time." Chapter 1150. What I'm searching for is a feather. The light of hope shone in Gu Yinying's eyes. Li Qingshan thought back. In the battle against the Corpse King on Burial Mound Mountain, you once used a feather to make space extremely fragile, which was how I managed to kill the Corpse King successfully. That was a feather of a space-splitting bird. Although it's extremely rare, it's not particularly difficult to obtain. Yeah, With the protector hawk god taking action, what can't we obtain? As a father, he's not as benevolent as you. Gu Yinying smiled. The gentle way he carried the tiger girl had truly taken her by surprise. What's wrong with that? Heartless might not necessarily be a true hero. How can a man not pity his child? Li Qingshan said. After all, she was his own flesh and blood. How could he not feel anything? Since he had feelings, there was no need to pretend. Heartless might not necessarily be a true hero. How can a man not pity his child? Gu Yinying repeated. Unfortunately, that's not the case in the cultivation community. Everyone uses their feelings as a burden. There are countless people who want to become heartless and emotionless. Like you. I'm not. In the eyes of the world, you're actually very heartless. That's true. The two of them were speechless for a moment. They flew through the boundless sky again, passing through countless clouds and mountains. We're almost there, Gu Yinying said. The city amongst the clouds? Li Qingshan gazed into the distance. No. Look up. Gu Yinying pointed upwards. Li Qingshan raised his head. All he saw was a haze extremely high up in the sky. It was rather difficult to make out what it was against the pure blue background. However, he could clearly sense that the space was rather strange, but it was not ripped apart like the demon cavern or the gate of hungry ghosts. It was more like it had been stirred into chaos. As a result, he waved his hand and unleashed the profound light illuminates all, pulling the chaos closer to him. In that moment, a strange power seemed to extend over. The spirit turtle's profound shell twisted and deformed. However, just now, Li Qingshan had already discovered that the chaos was much larger than it seemed. It enveloped a radius of 100 kilometers, and its depth was immeasurable. He could not help but ask, what is that? About 10 years before you were born, a feather fell from the sky. It pierced through the barrier of this world, and here are the traces left behind. Gu Yinying gazed at the chaotic void with an expression of reverence. A feather? Li Qingshan was astounded. If the world was like an egg, then this barrier would be the eggshell. It was practically indestructible, even though he had the tremors of the ox demon. Moreover, the higher one went, the stronger the astral winds would be. It would be difficult to even approach it. Regardless of whether it was the demon's den, the gate of hungry ghosts, or the blood-colored vortex in the Azura field, the reason why they could create a hole and connect to this world was because the demon's domain, hungry ghost realm, and Azura realm were countless times larger than the 9 provinces. It was equivalent to borrowing the power of the world. Even so, it was extremely difficult to expand. Even Fiend Celestial Qiongqi had to pass through the demon cavern in order to descend, and he had to pay a considerable price. It was unimaginable for an individual to fight against the world, because the energy possessed by the two was on a completely different order of magnitude. Because of this, the scene before him was completely beyond common sense. It's very powerful, isn't it? Just the fall of a feather easily pierced through the barrier of the world, and it might not even have been intentional. And the residual effects caused the world to be unable to repair even now. It's just a feather. Can you imagine what kind of existence its owner is? Gu Yinying kept sighing, a complete change from her usual carefree and calm demeanor. She was like a child describing a toy that she liked to the extreme, but could not obtain. Li Qingshan pondered. It was not completely unimaginable. Brother Ox's power was probably not below that of the feather's owner. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly stirred. 10 years before I was born? If he counted it, Brother Ox had appeared in his cowsheet at that time. Could there be some connection between the two? This feather is now in the city amongst the clouds? To be more precise, it's with the king of feather humans by Chun. At that time, there was a battle, and all the feather demon kings in the world sensed it. My father also tried to snatch it, but in the end, Bai Chun was the first to get it. The truth is really hard to predict. Perhaps the feather humans are also considered feather humans? I'm not sure, but if it hadn't fallen into his hands, even if my father got this feather, he would have had a lot of trouble. You said that all the feather demon kings sensed it? Yes, it's like a summoning. My father speculated that there might be an inheritance in it. Even if there is no true inheritance, just the power contained in this feather, and the information stored is enough for a feather to step into the realm of extraordinary. Speaking of this, I really envy your godson. He was born a divine bird phoenix, and his talent and bloodline are unparalleled. Ascension is just a matter of time. Even if he goes to a higher world, he will still have a great advantage. And I still have some backing in the 9 regions, but once I ascend, I will no longer have any advantage. My half-human, half-demon bloodline will even become a disadvantage. Whether I go to the human path or the beast path, it will be somewhat awkward. If I want to go further, I must establish a greater advantage before I lose my advantage. I seem to have said too much. You can understand my feelings, right? Maybe you can't understand. After all, the inheritance you have is also beyond imagination. I hope to get help from you. All right, I can understand, and I will do my best to help you. Even without you, I would still fight with you, the Feather Demon King. Li Qingshan looked at Gu Yenying, who had become a little long-winded, and felt a little embarrassed. He had such a great advantage that he really did not have the right to call himself the daughter of the Eagle God. Moreover, she was constantly fighting to change her fate. Thank you. Gu Yenying nodded slightly and returned to normal. But you still don't understand. The reason why I brought you here is to tell you that this matter can't be solved with pure power. After so many years, even if the Feather Demon King has not completely refined that feather and accepted the inheritance, as long as he can exert a little of its power, it will be very terrifying. I even suspect that he is already the strongest in the world. Then how did you originally plan to deal with him? I didn't plan to deal with him. According to the lifespan of the Feather Demon King, he has long reached the limit, and all the methods to prolong his life have been used up. I originally planned to outlive him to death. All the people hiding in the dark who covet him will take the opportunity to make a move. Although the forces in the city amongst the clouds are strong, they will definitely fall into chaos, and I will be able to take advantage of the situation. Gu Yenying stretched out her hand and grabbed at the air. Like a hunting eagle, she seemed to have already caught the magical feather in her hand. At that time, even the Eagle God would be her opponent, and they might have to fight for it with their own methods. She had already prepared many methods, and Li Qingshan would be her strongest helper. However, when she opened her hand, she found that it was empty. She could not help but smile helplessly. She had originally hoped that the Feather Demon King would be able to endure for a few more years, giving her enough time to grow. Only then would she be more confident in the future. Who would have thought that there would be such a change? The Feather Demon God, who had disappeared for many years, would actually appear in the 9 prefectures again. The power that the phoenix possessed was the symbol of eternal life. The Feather Demon King must have taken Li Fengyuan away to prolong his life. If he was left alone, no one could estimate how long he would last this time. It could be 100 years, 1,000 years, or even longer. Chapter 1151. Bai Chen's face returned to being handsome and healthy, looking like an immortal in the dense clouds. He bowed slightly. I hope you will not be stingy with your gifts. I will treat you as an honored guest. It's really because of this. Li Fengyuan naturally understood the meaning behind his words. If he refused to cooperate, then he could only become a prisoner. This was also the main reason why his second father refused to let him leave Fire Melt Mountain. His phoenix bloodline had always been the most precious heavenly resource. There was no cultivator who would find their lifespan too long. He took a step back and spread open his arms, forming a pair of brilliant wings. His entire body swirled with brilliance, and raging divine flames illuminated the entire divine feather palace. Make your move, winged human king. How unwise. Don't you understand that you're no match for me? Bai Chen was a little angry. The surrounding void surged. I know that the chance of defeating you is less than 1 in 10,000. But even if I don't have that kind of power, I should at least prove my courage. I will not surrender until I fight. Li Fengyuan charged at the winged human king with blazing splendor and flames. The winged human king in front of him suddenly disappeared. At the same time, Li Fengyuan felt a tight grip on his neck, and the blazing splendor and flames disappeared in an instant. You won't surrender unless you fight? I think it's a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Really refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. Bai Chen stared coldly at Li Fengyuan. All right. The battle is over. I'll be the guest of honor. Li Fengyuan raised his hands with a helpless expression. Then, he looked at Bai Chen's pure white wings, at the only speck of mixed color. Humph, at least you know what's good for you. Bai Chen slowly let go. It was not that he was magnanimous. Instead, he needed to use the phoenix blood to extend his lifespan, and only Li Fengyuan's cooperation could achieve the best effect. Li Fengyuan rubbed his neck and thought to himself, this isn't teleportation, it's just speed. How could it be so fast? It's unbelievable. The source of the power seems to be that azure feather, and it seems to be related to my bloodline. But it's definitely not a phoenix feather, so what is it? The phoenix was the god of the feathered species. He was related to many divine birds by blood. Almost all feathered species were known for their speed, so it was difficult to tell which type the pale green feather belonged to. He shouted loudly, is this how the winged people treat their guests? I'm thirsty and hungry. I want wine and meat. Quickly prepare a feast for me. Bai Chen gave him a deep look. He clapped his hands. Bai Jie stepped into the hall. He respectfully said, what instructions does my king have? Go and prepare the banquet. Prepare to welcome our esteemed guest. Yes. Bai Jie retreated, and Li Fengyuan also followed her out of the hall, as if he was in his own home. Where are you going? Bai Chen frowned. Let's go for a walk in the city. Can't I? I'm an honored guest. Don't be rude. Bai Jie shouted. Bai Chen waved his hand and said, it's fine. As long as we don't leave the city amongst the clouds, we can go anywhere. Do you need a guide? No need. Li Fengyuan stepped out of the main hall and flew away. My king, why did you let him go? The divine bird is nothing special, Bai Jie said. It's fine. Although I don't have much time, I can still wait for a day. Bai Chen smiled lightly and praised. You did very well in this matter. It's a pity that we couldn't invite that Li Qingshan. He just defeated the Dragon King in the Ink Sea. He might be a problem. Bai Jie was somewhat worried. That's really extraordinary. Although such a person is rare, it's not like I haven't seen him before. If he wants to come, then let him come. I'll let him stay here forever. I heard that he also has the bloodline of the phoenix, right? Li Fengyuan wandered around the city, trying his best to think of a countermeasure. He kept coming to the edge of the city, intentionally or unintentionally. However, when he saw the towering pillars of clouds, he gave up on the attempt to charge out. The formation of the city amongst the clouds was not that easy to break. Even if he was lucky enough to charge out, he would definitely not be able to escape the pursuit of the Feather Human King. No matter how he thought about it, he could not think of any good ideas. After all, any ingenious plan had to be built on the foundation of strength. Sigh, if I can survive another heavenly tribulation, I might have a way to escape. In the evening, the sky was clear and bright, and the stars were incomparably resplendent. In the Divine Feather Palace, the banquet had just begun. Bai Chen sat high on the throne, and raised his wine cup high. Dear ministers, please raise your cups together to welcome our esteemed guest, the divine phoenix bird Li Fengyuan. He then asked Li Fengyuan beside him, fellow Taoist, are you satisfied with this reception? Satisfied. Li Fengyuan looked around. There were actually more than 10 experts, who had survived 3 heavenly tribulations in the palace. And Bai Jie said that there were still a few, who were cultivating, and unable to rush over. This was the foundation and strength of the feather human race. However, the most dangerous opponent was still the Feather Human King, Bai Chen, who was sitting on the throne. What exactly was that pale green feather? Eldest father, I know that you love your son, but don't rush over directly and fall into this bastard birdman's trap. If there are no flaws, then think of a way to create one. If snatching doesn't work, then steal it. Gu Yinying's eyes turned into a sharp eagle's eyes, filled with determination. Steal? At our realm of cultivation, how are we supposed to steal? Li Qingshan really did not find this to be any different from snatching. None of them were mortals. Their senses were extremely sharp. Not to mention that the feather had grown from the feather human king. It might be a little risky, but all I can do is try it again. Gu Yinying glanced at the chaos in the sky again. The scenery up there is very beautiful, but it's a pity that we're in a hurry. I'll take you there again if we have the chance. Let's go. Where are we going this time? The Frost Province, Sleep Valley. The north wind swept up large snowflakes into the air. The world seemed to become chaotic as snowy giants stood on the icy plains. The Frost Province was even larger than the Mist Province. It was known as the largest province in the world, so it had its own sense of vastness. What snow? Li Qingshan praised. If the little phoenix had not been captured, he really wanted to drink to his heart's content in this sight. There just happened to be someone accompanying him. The wind and snow swirled up Gu Yinying's clothes and long sleeves. She stared ahead attentively and pointed. We're here. That's White Elephant Mountain. Li Qingshan went up to stand beside her. All he saw was a great snowy mountain on the icy plains. It was like a huge, white elephant galloping through the wind and snow, with a vague black line. Arriving before the mountain, he saw a deep, narrow valley that split the mountain in half. This is Sleep Valley, a renowned forbidden ground. There doesn't seem to be anything special about it. Li Qingshan gazed into the distance. There was no danger in the valley at all. Even the spirit turtle did not sense any danger. If it were not for the extremely dense spiritual qi, it seemed like a regular valley. You'll know once you go in. Be careful not to fall asleep. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.